Thanks for joining. Find your most relaxing position, take a slow breath in, and let's begin our very quiet stroll through history. And if you feel like these videos are of any use to you, then you can like and subscribe, but only if you really feel like it. And now, let's begin. Back in the day way back when your favorite navigational aid was a handful of stars and a good guess, the Polynesians were out there rewriting the book on seafaring. We're talking about a time when the Pacific Ocean was as much a mystery as the far side of the moon. Imagine an expanse of water covering 63 million square miles, nearly twice the size of the Atlantic, with islands scattered like confetti at a giant's wedding. And yet, these ancient mariners were hopping from one speck of land to another with nothing more than a canoe, the night sky, and a healthy dose of courage. They weren't just travellers. They were the original oceanic adventurers, the swashbuckling star surfers of their day. Let's dive right into the nuts and bolts, or should I say the wood and fibres, of their navigation. The Polynesians didn't have compasses, sextants, or GPS. Instead, they used the sun, the stars, ocean swells, and even the flight patterns of birds. It was like playing a high-stakes game of Cosmic Connect. The dots. The key players were the star maps, known as wayfinding, which was a bit like having a celestial cheat sheet. The Polynesians knew the stars so well that they could navigate thousands of miles of open ocean with an accuracy that would make modern navigators do a double take. It's worth noting that these daring explorers were traversing the Pacific in vessels that were more akin to oversized surfboards than luxury liners. The waka, or canoe, often measured around 60 feet long and was constructed from trees and plant fibers. It's the kind of craftsmanship that would make a modern IKEA assembly look like a breeze. These canoes could carry a small community across the ocean, which was basically the ancient equivalent of a family road trip, minus the rest stops. Let's not forget the geography of the Pacific Ocean itself. Imagine an ocean so vast that it could swallow entire continents without so much as a belch. It's here, amid this vast blue desert, that the Polynesians honed their navigational skills to a razor's edge. The Pacific is dotted with islands, but they're not exactly easy to spot from a distance. Think of it like finding a needle in a haystack, except the haystack is 1 million square miles of open water, and the needle is a speck of land barely larger than a city block. Now, let's talk about the ocean currents. The Polynesians had a knack for reading the waves as if they were flipping through the pages of a favourite book. They understood the interplay of the trade winds and the ocean swells, using them to guide their journeys with a precision that even modern sailors would envy. It's like having a conversation with the ocean itself, a dialogue between man and nature that few today could replicate. All this talk of navigation and exploration might sound romantic, but let's not sugarcoat it. The reality was anything but glamorous. These voyages were perilous, with the ever-present threats of storms, starvation, and getting hopelessly lost. But for the Polynesians, these were mere footnotes in the grand adventure of discovery. They were driven by a spirit of exploration that transcended the fear of the unknown. In the grand tapestry of human history, the Polynesian navigators stand out as true pioneers. They charted courses across the largest ocean on Earth with nothing more than their wits and the natural world as their guide. They remind us that while technology has made many things easier, it's the raw ingenuity and daring of the human spirit that truly pushes the boundaries of what's possible. So next time you're lost in a sea of digital maps and satellite signals, spare a thought for these ancient mariners who found their way without so much as a "you have reached your destination" in sight. Speaking of which, let's steer our conversation toward the engineering marvels that made these epic voyages possible. The Polynesian canoes. Imagine for a moment you're standing on a distant beach, watching as a wakatawa or double-hulled canoe is launched into the vast ocean. This isn't just a boat, it's a feat of engineering genius, crafted without a single power tool or blueprint. The Polynesian canoe was the original multi-hull marvel, a kind of ancient catamaran that could carry up to 100 people along with their supplies, livestock, and dreams of distant shores. The construction of these canoes was no small feat. It was a community project, a coming together of resources, skills, and sheer human will. The primary material was wood, often from the giant kauri or breadfruit trees. These trees were chosen not just for their size, but for their strength and buoyancy. The hulls were carved meticulously using stone and shell tools, which, let's be honest, makes modern woodworking look like child's play. The parts were then lashed together using coconut fibre rope, a testament to the resourcefulness of these ancient shipbuilders. No nails, no screws, just a deep understanding of natural materials and how to combine them effectively. Talk about sustainable design. These canoes weren't just functional, they were a statement of cultural identity and technological prowess. The sails, often made from pandanus leaves, were designed to harness the power of the wind with an efficiency that would make even today's sailors nod in respect. This was wind power in its purest form, long before anyone had heard of a carbon footprint. And if you think about it, these vessels were essentially the yachts of their day. They were sleek, fast, and capable of navigating the treacherous waters of the Pacific with remarkable precision. Now, let's not gloss over the economic and social costs of these maritime ventures. Building a canoe was like launching a start-up high-risk, high-reward, and a whole lot of sweat equity. The construction of a single canoe could take months, even years, and required the labour and expertise of many. It was an investment not just of time, but of resources. The community had to provide food and materials for the craftsmen, support the families involved, and sometimes even negotiate for trees with neighbouring tribes. This was a huge undertaking that could strain the resources of a community, much like a modern company burning through venture capital. But why go through all this trouble? The answer lies in the opportunities these canoes provided. They were the ultimate ticket to exploration, trade, and expansion. A successful voyage could bring back new resources, establish trade routes, and even lead to the discovery of new islands ripe for settlement. The potential rewards were immense, but so were the risks. A failed expedition could mean the loss of valuable community members and resources, not to mention the emotional toll of missing loved ones. In many ways, these voyages were a gamble on a grand scale. The Polynesians were betting on their understanding of the ocean, their craftsmanship, and their ability to navigate the unknown. They were entrepreneurs of the sea, taking calculated risks to expand their horizons and improve their lives. And just like any good start-up story, there were tales of both triumph and disaster. Some expeditions returned with bounty and new knowledge, while others were lost to the unforgiving waves. The social dynamics of these voyages were equally fascinating. The leadership of a canoe expedition was a delicate balance of power and responsibility. Chiefs or navigators, known as pru, were often at the helm, responsible for the lives of everyone on board. Their authority was not just based on skill, but also on their ability to inspire confidence and unity among the crew. This was leadership in its rawest form, where every decision could mean the difference between life and death. Let's pause to debunk a common myth. The idea that these voyages were solely for exploration, and that each island was discovered by chance. While there was certainly an element of serendipity, these expeditions were often planned with specific goals in mind, whether it was finding new lands or establishing trade. The Polynesians were strategic thinkers, not just aimless wanderers. They had a deep understanding of their world and a vision for what they wanted to achieve. As we consider the legacy of these incredible maritime endeavours, it's clear that the Polynesian navigators were far more than just skilled sailors. They were innovators, leaders, and visionaries who pushed the boundaries of what was possible in their time. Their story is one of ingenuity and courage, a testament to the power of human ambition and the desire to explore beyond the horizon. And while their canoes may no longer sail the oceans, the spirit of their voyages continues to inspire us to this day. So, as we leave the shores of this part of the story, keep an eye on the horizon, because there's plenty more adventure to come. As we leave the ancient shores behind, let's plunge headfirst into the churning waves of the Pacific, where the Polynesians embarked on voyages that would make any modern adventurer's head spin. It's time to talk about Hawaii and Easter Island, two names that evoke images of paradise today, but were once the stuff of legends and whispered tales. These islands weren't found by accident. They were the jewels of the Pacific, meticulously sought after by navigators who dared to dream big. First up, let's set sail for Hawaii, a journey of over 2,400 miles from the Marquesas Islands. That's like driving from New York to Los Angeles, except without the luxury of snack stops or Google Maps. This epic voyage wasn't just a casual afternoon paddle, it was a monumental feat of endurance, skill, and sheer willpower. These navigators weren't just trusting in the stars. They were placing their faith in a complex system of knowledge passed down through generations. It was a kind of ancient GPS, minus the soothing voice telling you to turn left at the next star. The journey to Hawaii was far from a tropical cruise. Imagine being on a wooden canoe, exposed to the elements, with nothing but the vast blue horizon stretching endlessly in every direction. Food shortages were a constant threat, and the ocean was less a benevolent guide and more an unpredictable beast, ready to swallow the unprepared. The romantic notion of the fearless explorer fades quickly when you're battling dehydration and hoping your next meal doesn't swim away. Despite these challenges, the Polynesians made the journey to Hawaii not once but multiple times, establishing a thriving culture and society there. It wasn't just luck, it was a calculated risk, driven by the need for resources, trade, and new opportunities. They weren't just wandering the ocean aimlessly, they were strategizing, planning, and executing voyages that demanded precise timing and deep knowledge of the natural world. Talk about strategic planning. Take that, modern project managers. Now, let's pivot to Easter Island, or Rapa Nui, as it's known locally, a tiny speck of land over 2,000 miles from the nearest inhabited island. If Hawaii was the Pacific's crown jewel, Easter Island was its hidden gem. The journey to this remote outpost was the ultimate test of navigational prowess. It was like finding a needle in a haystack, except the haystack was the entire Pacific Ocean, and the needle was a mysterious island with giant stone heads giving you the side-eye. The myths of fearless explorers make it sound like these voyages were all about glory and discovery, but let's get real. The practical challenges were immense. Supplies had to be meticulously planned, with enough food and water to last weeks, if not months. Ancient Polynesians relied on preserved foods like dried fish and taro, but even the best-laid plans could falter under the relentless sun and salt water. The threat of scurvy was real, and morale could sink faster than a leaky canoe. Yet, against all odds, the Polynesians reached Easter Island, leaving behind a legacy of monumental stone statues, or moai, that continue to baffle and inspire. These voyages weren't just about finding new lands, they were about creating new homes, new societies, and leaving an indelible mark on history. The Polynesians weren't just explorers, they were settlers, visionaries with a knack for turning the unknown into the familiar. But let's not kid ourselves, this wasn't a one-way ticket to paradise. The ocean was a harsh mistress, and many voyages ended in tragedy, with canoes lost to storms and sailors never seen again. The romanticized image of the fearless explorer glosses over the harsh realities of ocean travel. There were no lifeboats, no emergency beacons, just the vast, indifferent sea and the hope that the stars would guide them home. In the grand scheme of things, these voyages were a testament to human ingenuity and resilience. They remind us that while the ocean can be a daunting, unforgiving expanse, it was also a bridge between worlds, a pathway to new possibilities. The Polynesians weren't just brave, they were skilled, knowledgeable, and, dare I say, a bit audacious. So next time you sip a cocktail on a Hawaiian beach, or ponder the mysteries of Easter Island, spare a thought for the intrepid navigators who made it all possible. They were the original risk-takers, the pioneers who dared to dream of worlds beyond the horizon. And as we wrap up this leg of our journey, keep your eyes peeled for the next chapter, where we'll explore the legacy of these epic voyages and the enduring impact of Polynesian culture on the world. Stay tuned. There's plenty more sea to sail and stories to tell. As we sail forward from the intoxicating tales of Polynesian adventure, let's dock at the gritty realities of what drove these epic voyages. Because, let's face it, no one sets off across 63 million square miles of ocean just for the postcard views. Behind those romanticized images of fearless explorers and idyllic islands lay a complex web of social structures, political ambitions, and resource needs that would make a modern geopolitical strategist's head spin. First, let's talk hierarchy. The social structure of Polynesian societies was as layered as a wedding cake, with chiefs known as ariki or ali, sitting at the top, calling the shots. They weren't just ceremonial figureheads. These leaders wielded real power, determining who got what, when, and how. Imagine being the CEO of an ocean-going corporation, except instead of board meetings, you've got tribal councils, and instead of quarterly results, you're dealing with harvests and raids. And much like today's corporate climbers, These chiefs were driven by ambition and the need to expand their influence. But why all the voyaging? Well, resources were the name of the game. Islands, while picturesque, often lacked the resources needed to sustain growing populations. Land was limited, and arable soil even more so. The quest for new territories was akin to a high-stakes game of Monopoly. Find a new island, and you've got more resources to leverage, more people to lead, and more power to wield. Let's toss in the economic factor. Agriculture might have been the backbone of these societies, but trade was the circulatory system. The Polynesians weren't just farmers, they were savvy traders, dealing in everything from obsidian and basalt to prized red feathers. These weren't just pretty trinkets. They were the currency of alliances, the stock options of the sea. Establishing trade routes meant economic power, and economic power meant political clout. Suddenly, those risky ocean voyages start to look a lot like strategic business expansions, with all the risks and rewards that entails. Now, if you're picturing these voyages as one big happy family outing, let's clear up that little misconception. The logistics of setting sail were daunting. Supplies had to be stockpiled, routes plotted, and crew assembled. We're talking about organizing an expedition that could last months, a feat that required cooperation, coordination, and a whole lot of trust. This wasn't a solo endeavor, it was a community affair where everyone had skin in the game. The entire society often pooled resources to back these maritime ventures, making them a collective investment in the future. And just who were these intrepid souls daring to brave the vast unknown? While the leaders might have been the face of the operation, the backbone was the crew, ordinary people with extraordinary courage. These were the unsung heroes, the ones who paddled tirelessly, navigated perilous waters, and faced the wrath of the ocean with nothing more than their wits and a slab of wood between them and a watery grave. They weren't just passengers, they were vital players in a high-stakes drama that could determine the fate of their people. Yet, for all the meticulous planning, these voyages were far from guaranteed successes. Storms, disease, and the ever-present threat of getting hopelessly lost were constant companions. The romantic notion of setting sail for adventure quickly fades when you're staring down the barrel of starvation or battling an outbreak of illness on a cramped, rocking canoe. These were the gritty realities, the harsh truths that often get glossed over in tales of exploration. But let's pivot back to the politics because, oh boy, was it a tangled web? The quest for new lands was as much about asserting dominance as it was about survival. Territorial disputes were common, and not every encounter with a neighbouring tribe was a friendly exchange of shell necklaces. Sometimes it was more like a hostile takeover, with land grabs and power plays that would make even Machiavelli nod in approval. The stakes were high, and the outcomes could reshape the political landscape as dramatically as any royal coup. Talk about high drama, and yet, amidst this swirling chaos, these voyages were also a testament to the indomitable human spirit. They were about more than just survival. They were about the pursuit of a better life, the yearning for discovery, and the sheer audacity to dream beyond the horizon. The Polynesians weren't just settlers. They were visionaries, architects of a new world forged from the unyielding ocean. So, as we sail into the next chapter of this saga, keep in mind that the story of Polynesian expansion is one of contrasts, a blend of myth and reality, romance and hardship, ambition and necessity. It's a tale as vast and deep as the Pacific itself, and there's still plenty of sea to explore and stories to unfold. Stay tuned, because this voyage is far from over, and the next leg promises even more revelations. As we unfurl the sails on this final leg of our journey, let's talk legacy. Because, let's be honest, the Polynesians didn't just leave behind a trail of coconut shells and tales of daring do. They imprinted their genius on the very fabric of maritime history, influencing everything from navigational techniques to cultural practices. These were the true masters of the sea, the navigators who charted courses through the Pacific long before the advent of GPS and satellite imagery turned us all into armchair explorers. First up, let's tackle the enduring impact on modern navigation. The Polynesians perfected the art of wayfinding, a sophisticated system that relied on the stars, ocean swells, and even the habits of seabirds. It's like having a Google Maps that requires actual brainpower instead of mindlessly following a blue line. This ancient knowledge isn't just historical footnote, it's been resurrected and celebrated in our times. The revival of traditional navigation by master wayfinders like Mao Pielug and Nainoa Thompson has shown the world that you don't need digital gadgets to conquer the sea. Their journeys on vessels like the Hoklahea, a traditional Polynesian voyaging canoe, prove that ancient skills can hold their own against modern tech. It's a reminder that sometimes the old ways are worth holding on to, not just for nostalgia, but for their intrinsic value and precision. Now, let's debunk some of the more fanciful legends. There's a romantic notion that the Polynesians were driven solely by the call of adventure or spiritual quests. While those elements certainly added colour to the tapestry, the reality was grounded in necessity and strategy. The Polynesians were pragmatists at heart. Their voyages were often calculated endeavours to find new resources, settle fertile lands, and establish trade networks. This was exploration with an agenda, not just a whimsical wanderlust, but a necessity-driven mandate. They were the original strategists, leveraging their environment and skills to ensure the survival and prosperity of their people. And what about the cultural impact? It's hard to overstate how these seafaring pioneers shaped societies across the Pacific. Their influence is seen not only in the spread of language and customs, but also in the very genetic makeup of the islands they settled. Archaeological evidence and linguistic studies trace the Polynesian diaspora across thousands of miles, revealing a web of interconnected cultures that thrived centuries before European explorers discovered the Pacific. The Polynesians were the glue that held these island communities together, creating a shared heritage that resonates to this day. But let's not get swept away by the romance of it all. The realities of these voyages were anything but glamorous. The Pacific Ocean is a formidable adversary, and the risks were enormous. It wasn't uncommon for entire expeditions to vanish without a trace, victims of storms, shipwrecks, or simply the vastness of the sea. The romantic image of the fearless navigator belies the harsh truth that many never returned, leaving their stories untold and their legacies unsung. These weren't just daring adventurers, they were risk-takers betting against the odds, driven by a mix of desperation and hope. The political landscape of these societies was equally complex. The leadership behind each voyage was as much about diplomacy as it was about navigation. Chiefs and navigators had to balance the aspirations of their people with the harsh realities of limited resources and the potential for conflict. These were not autocratic rulers, but leaders who earned their positions through skill, wisdom, and the ability to unite their communities in pursuit of common goals. It was a delicate dance of power and persuasion, where the success of a voyage could elevate a leader to legendary status or, conversely, lead to their downfall. Economically, these voyages were pivotal. By establishing trade routes and settling new lands, the Polynesians created a network of exchange that stretched across the Pacific. This wasn't just about moving goods. It was about cultural exchange, the spread of ideas, and the strengthening of alliances. The Polynesian trade network was an early example of globalization, where the movement of goods, people, and culture created a vibrant tapestry of interconnected societies. It's a testament to their foresight and adaptability, qualities that remain relevant even in today's fast-paced world. As we wrap up this maritime saga, let's reflect on the real heroes of this story, the unsung sailors who braved the open sea with nothing but their courage and a deep understanding of the natural world. These were ordinary people performing extraordinary feats, proving that human ingenuity and spirit can transcend the boundaries of what's possible. They remind us that exploration is not just about discovery, but about the journey itself, the challenges faced, the lessons learned, and the legacies left behind. In the grand narrative of human history, the Polynesian navigators stand out as exemplars of human resilience and innovation. Their story is a testament to the power of knowledge, the drive for exploration, and the ability to adapt and thrive in the face of adversity. So, the next time you find yourself glancing at a map or marveling at a GPS's precision, spare a thought for these ancient mariners who found their way across the world's largest ocean using nothing more than their wits and an unyielding spirit. And there you have it, the legacy of the Polynesian navigators, a tale of epic voyages, cultural convergence, and enduring influence. While the romantic myths may paint them as fearless adventurers driven by whimsy, the truth is far richer and more complex. These were strategists, leaders and pioneers whose impact is still felt today. Their story is far from a footnote. It's a cornerstone of maritime history, a saga of human ambition and the unquenchable desire to explore beyond the horizon. As we anchor this narrative, remember that the spirit of these ancient navigators continues to inspire, reminding us all to keep our eyes on the stars and our hearts set on discovery. In the dim haze of history, where truth and legend sip tea together, sits Apollonius of Tyre, a man whose life is as perplexing as a box of tangled Christmas lights. Not exactly a household name in the annals of history. Apollonius is the proverbial cat that curiosity didn't quite kill, but rather turned into a medieval celebrity. This guy's story is the original game of telephone, with each retelling adding another layer of embellishment until the line between reality and fiction is blurrier than a cheap pair of reading glasses. Let's start with his origins, or at least try to. Apollonius of Tyre allegedly hailed from Tyre, a city that was, at its height, the Big Apple of the ancient Phoenician world. This was a place known for its purple dye, which was as valuable as liquid gold, and seafaring prowess that would give any modern yacht club a serious inferiority complex. But here's the kicker. While Tyre was real and historically significant, Apollonius himself is more elusive than a cat in a thunderstorm. Our dear Apollonius makes his grand entrance in a medieval romance titled The Tale of Apollonius of Tyre. It's a story that was as popular in medieval Europe as binge-watching is today, making its rounds from Greek to Latin to the vernacular languages of the time. Now, why did this character capture the medieval imagination so thoroughly? Perhaps it was his penchant for adventure, drama, and a good old-fashioned shipwreck. According to the tales, Apollonius was a prince who was wronged and forced to flee his homeland. If that sounds a bit like a soap opera plot, that's because it is. Our man Apollonius finds himself in one disaster after another, including that classic of ancient storytelling, a shipwreck. Because what's a legendary tale without a good shipwreck, right? Think of it as the ultimate ancient plot twist, the kind that kept medieval audiences on the edge of their wooden seats. Let's not forget the royal intrigue. Apollonius, in true dramatic fashion, supposedly deciphered a riddle that revealed a scandalous affair involving a king. This revelation didn't exactly earn him a thank you card. Instead, it sent him packing, sailing away faster than you could say exile. In a time when rulers often had the moral flexibility of an overcooked noodle, Apollonius's knack for unearthing secrets made him less popular than a tax collector at a party. But here's where it gets even more interesting. The tale of Apollonius somehow morphs through time, evolving like a historical game of Chinese whispers. By the time it reaches medieval Europe, Apollonius is no longer just a man on the run, but a figure of chivalric romance. The medieval version of his story places him in a world where knights fight for honor and damsels are in perpetual distress. A world that's about as historically accurate as wearing a smartwatch in ancient Rome. And speaking of inaccuracy, the medieval fascination with Apollonius is a testament to how history isn't just recorded, it's rewritten by its storytellers. The character of Apollonius became a canvas for medieval authors to project their hopes, fears, and societal values. In the Middle Ages, when the idea of a meritocracy was about as real as a unicorn, Apollonius's journey from disgrace to royalty was the perfect escapist fantasy. It's like rooting for the underdog in a sports drama, where the odds are as overwhelming as a medieval feast's calorie count. But for all the embellishments and narrative flourishes, there's a kernel of truth in the tale of Apollonius. It reflects the very real dangers and uncertainties of ancient seafaring life. In the ancient Mediterranean, ships were both symbols of connectivity and potential death traps. They were the ancient world's equivalent of flying economy class, an experience filled with discomfort and the occasional bout of panic. And just like the low-cost airlines of today, not every journey ended where it was supposed to. So, what should we take away from the tale of Apollonius of Tyre? Beyond the drama and the shipwrecks, his story reminds us how history can be both a mirror and a mirage. It's a reflection of the times it was told in, yet also a distortion shaped by the storyteller's desires and imaginations. Apollonius might have started as a footnote in history, but through the power of storytelling, he became a legend, navigating the stormy seas of fiction and fact with the grace of a seasoned sailor. In the end, perhaps the real treasure of Apollonius of Tyre isn't the man himself, but the stories he inspired, stories that continue to captivate us, even as we chuckle at their fantastical twists. But let's not get too starry-eyed about Apollonius just yet. The tale paints him as a master navigator, a veritable sea whisperer who could glide through the Mediterranean's turbulent waters like a dolphin on a mission. In reality, though, ancient navigation was more akin to a game of blindfolded pin the tail on the donkey than a scientific endeavour. So, was Apollonius really the ancient GPS, or just a guy with an uncanny knack for not getting hopelessly lost? Now, if you've ever tried to understand ancient navigation, you'll know that the seafaring folks of the time were essentially the MacGyvers of maritime travel. They had to rely on an array of rudimentary tools and a hefty dose of intuition. No fancy electronic gadgets here, just the sun, stars, wind and waves, with maybe a compass if they were feeling particularly high-tech. The Mediterranean, with its unpredictable weather and countless islands, was not exactly a sailor's paradise. It was more like the ultimate test of patience and luck. For context, we're talking about a period where the concept of longitude was as mysterious as the plot of a David Lynch film. One supposed innovation attributed to Apollonius was his alleged mastery of the star-studded sky. The ancient mariners used the stars as their celestial map, turning the heavens into the first, albeit unreliable, Google Maps. While modern GPS can pinpoint your location down to a few meters, these sailors had to contend with cloudy nights and the occasional rogue wave that could send their calculations and their ships wildly off course. So, if you think about it, ancient navigators were really just like us trying to find that one street without Wi-Fi, frustrated and more than a little lost. And then there's the matter of the Mediterranean's infamous capriciousness. This wasn't a body of water that played nice. Sudden storms could whip up faster than you could say, batten down the hatches, and currents could pull you off course with the subtlety of a bull in a china shop. So, did Apollonius have some secret technique to tame these treacherous waters, or was he simply blessed with an abundance of good fortune? The tales would have us believe in the former, but history, with its penchant for pragmatism, might suggest otherwise. In terms of technology, the ancient world was working with tools that make a modern smartphone look like something out of Star Trek. Ships were primarily powered by sails and oars, with the occasional bit of shouting from the captain to keep things lively. These vessels were not built for comfort, they were built for survival. The typical merchant ship of the time was about as roomy as a sardine can, and the risk of shipwreck was ever present. For a sense of scale, some of these ships were around 100 feet long and could carry up to 200 tons of cargo. Impressive, but by no means unsinkable. The economic context is also a crucial piece of the puzzle. Tyre's economy was heavily dependent on trade, particularly in that purple dye we mentioned earlier, the kind that could make even the most drab toga look like $1 million. This meant that navigation wasn't just a skill, it was an economic necessity. The ability to efficiently and safely transport goods across the sea was vital for maintaining Tyre's status and wealth. Apollonius's alleged prowess as a navigator would have made him a valuable asset, assuming he was more than just a mythological figure. Politically, the Mediterranean was a patchwork quilt of competing city-states, empires, and would-be conquerors. Each was vying for control of trade routes and resources. Navigating these waters wasn't just about avoiding rocks and storms, it was also about dodging pirates and rival ships with less than friendly intentions. The political landscape was as volatile as the sea itself, and a skilled navigator would need to be as savvy with diplomacy as he was with steering a ship. So, while the legend of Apollonius paints him as a master of the sea, the reality of ancient navigation suggests a story that is far more complex and far less romantic. It's easy to see why medieval storytellers would embellish his navigational skills. The tale of a brilliant sea captain makes for much better reading than a series of lucky guesses. But as we peel back the layers of myth, we find a world where navigation was a blend of art, science, and pure luck, where the sea was both a highway and a barrier, and where every voyage was a roll of the cosmic dice. As we continue to chart the course of Apollonius's story, it's clear that the real innovation wasn't just in the navigation techniques themselves, but in the ability of ancient sailors to adapt to a world without modern conveniences. Their resilience and ingenuity are what truly powered their journeys, much more than any mythical ability to command the waves. Just like Apollonius, we're all navigating our own seas, sometimes with no more than a star to guide us and a hope that the storms will pass. And isn't that, in a way, the truest innovation of all? While navigating the seas might have been Apollonius's alleged forte, his supposed contributions to the arts and sciences are where things get really interesting or confusing, depending on how you look at it. Apollonius of Tyre, it seems, was the ancient world's equivalent of a brand name, slapped onto various works and innovations like a celebrity endorsement with questionable authenticity. So, did he really leave a mark on the intellectual landscape, or was he just the ancient version of a Made in China label? Let's dive into the world of arts and sciences in the era when Apollonius supposedly existed. It was a time when intellectual property was as well guarded as a chocolate chip cookie at a diet convention. Ideas moved faster than a rumor in a small town, and attribution was often as clear as mud. Ancient scholars frequently worked in groups, sharing and building off each other's ideas like a never-ending game of intellectual leapfrog. This was the golden age of collaboration, with places like the Library of Alexandria acting as the Facebook of ancient knowledge, minus the cat memes but full of philosophical debates and scientific experiments. But here's the kicker. Apollonius of Tyre wasn't Apollonius of Rhodes, who penned the Argonautica, nor was he Apollonius the mathematician, who came up with the concept of conic sections. Our Apollonius, the Tyrian, remains a shadowy figure in history with no surviving works directly attributed to him. It's as if he was an ancient placeholder, a convenient pseudonym for works that otherwise might not get the attention they deserved. This was an era where anonymity was often the norm, and attaching a recognizable name could boost a work's credibility faster than you can say viral marketing. Economically speaking, the ancient world was far from monolithic, yet it shared a universal truth. Knowledge was power, and power was profit. The cities that invested in education and intellectual pursuits often thrived. Tyre, with its economic stakes tied to trade and innovation, had every reason to cultivate a culture that valued ideas. The city was a hub for merchants and thinkers alike, a melting pot where knowledge was traded as eagerly as goods. So, any association with intellectual advancements, real or imagined, could only enhance its reputation. Politically, the story gets juicier. The ancient Mediterranean was a hotbed of intellectual rivalry, a place where cities vied for cultural supremacy as fiercely as they did for control over trade routes. Leaders were keen to be seen as patrons of the arts and sciences, eager to bolster their legitimacy and prestige. Having an intellectual powerhouse associated with your city was akin to having a Nobel laureate in your corner today. Whether Apollonius was a genuine intellectual or a convenient myth, his name was a valuable asset in the cultural arms race of the time. And let's not forget the social context, which was as complex as a soap opera plot twist. In a world where literacy was a luxury and education was often reserved for the elite, stories of intellectual prowess were both aspirational and inspirational. The idea of a lone genius, a solitary figure who could conquer the mysteries of the universe, was a narrative that resonated deeply. It was the ultimate underdog story, the tale of someone who rose above the constraints of their time to achieve greatness. Except, of course, that the reality was far more communal. Achievements in arts and sciences were often the product of collective effort, the result of scholars standing on the shoulders of giants and occasionally borrowing their ideas without asking. So, was Apollonius a real innovator, or just a convenient literary device? The truth is likely a mix of both. His story encapsulates the romantic ideal of the lone genius, but it also highlights the collaborative nature of ancient knowledge. It invites us to question the narratives we've been fed and to recognize the unsung heroes behind history's great advancements. Like a well-worn book with a missing author, the legend of Apollonius reminds us that history is not just about the stories we tell, but about the voices we choose to amplify or silence. As we continue to unravel the tangled yarn of Apollonius's legacy, it's clear that his tale is a testament to the power of storytelling itself. Whether he was an actual figure of intellectual renown or simply a name stitched onto the tapestry of history, his legend endures. It challenges us to look beyond the surface of the stories we know and to appreciate the rich, messy, and collaborative reality that lies beneath. In the grand narrative of history, Apollonius of Tyre serves as both a reminder of our capacity for creativity and a cautionary tale about the allure of myth over truth. So, as we pause at this junction in Apollonius's journey, we find ourselves standing at the crossroads of legend and reality. His contributions to the arts and sciences might be more fiction than fact, but they offer a window into the vibrant, interconnected world of ancient intellectual life. And as we prepare to sail further into his story, we remain anchored by the understanding that history, like the sea, is vast, unpredictable, and full of surprises, much like the tales of Apollonius himself. And so, as we sail further into the murky waters of Apollonius's story past, we find ourselves on the cusp of another transformation, not of Apollonius himself, but of his legend. The medieval storytellers, those purveyors of parchment and prose, took his tale and spun it into a tapestry more dazzling than a Renaissance fair on a sunny day. They turned him into the medieval equivalent of a rock star, complete with chivalric adventures and romantic entanglements that would make even the most seasoned soap opera writer blush. You see, by the time the Middle Ages rolled around, Apollonius of Tyre had undergone a makeover that would put any reality TV show to shame. He was no longer just a hapless sailor or an anonymous intellectual. He was a bona fide romantic hero. Picture a knight in shining armor, minus the actual armor, and you've got the medieval Apollonius. His narrative was recast into a world where honor was the currency of the day and damsels were as distressed as a pair of pre-ripped jeans. But let's hit pause on this romanticized reel and rewind to the gritty reality of ancient life, which was less Cinderella and more Game of Thrones. And we're talking the Red Wedding kind of plot twist. Ancient Tyre, with its vibrant trade and bustling ports, was as cutthroat as a Wall Street trading floor. The real Apollonius, if he existed, would have been navigating not just the treacherous Mediterranean, but a labyrinth of political intrigues and economic pressures that would make a modern-day boardroom look like a picnic. Medieval narratives, however, were less concerned with these gritty truths and more interested in crafting a story that resonated with the values of their time. Chivalry was chic, and the ladies loved a good tale of courtly love, as long as it was someone else's drama. This was an era when love was less about heartfelt connections and more about strategic alliances. Forget flowers and chocolates, medieval romance was a chess game, and the stakes were as high as a cathedral spire. In this chivalric remix, Apollonius was painted as a man of noble blood, wronged by fate and yet rising to the occasion with the grace of a ballet dancer on a tightrope. His life was a series of romantic quests, complete with ladies to rescue and villains to vanquish. These stories were a hit in a time when the concept of a meritocracy was as mythical as dragons. Apollonius's rise from rags to riches was a narrative that offered hope and escapism for a population often bound by the rigid hierarchies of feudal life. But let's not get too swept away by these tales of heroism. The real world, as it often does, had a way of crashing the fairy tale party with all the subtlety of a brick through a stained glass window. The ancient Mediterranean was a melting pot of cultures, each with its own set of rules and rivalries. Pirates roamed the seas like freelancing marauders, and political alliances shifted with the wind. In this world, survival required more than a noble heart. It demanded wits sharper than a knight's sword and a constitution as tough as a Roman road. Economically, the stakes were high. Tyre's prosperity hung in the balance of trade winds and political tides. The city's wealth was tied to its trade networks, and maintaining these was as crucial as it was precarious. A single shipwreck or a failed negotiation could spell disaster. The romanticized Apollonius might have charmed his way through the courts of medieval Europe, but the real one would have needed a shrewd mind and an ironclad strategy to thrive. Politically, the Mediterranean was a chessboard of city-states, each jostling for supremacy. Alliances were as fragile as a spider's web, and betrayal was a common currency. In this world, Apollonius's supposed rise to power wasn't just a tale of personal triumph, it was a reflection of the constant power struggles that defined the era. Medieval storytellers conveniently glossed over these harsh realities, preferring instead to focus on the more palatable narrative of a hero's journey. And let's talk about the social scene, which was as complex as a Byzantine mosaic. In a time when social mobility was about as common as a solar eclipse, the idea of a prince in exile finding his way back to greatness was a story worth telling and retelling. It was a narrative that resonated with a society yearning for tales of hope and redemption, even if the truth was more mundane and magical. The transformation of Apollonius into a romantic hero wasn't just a creative choice, it was a reflection of the values and desires of medieval society. This was a world that craved stories of chivalry and valor, tales that offered a break from the often harsh realities of daily life. The medieval Apollonius was a product of his time, a cultural construct as much as a character in a story. In the end, the legend of Apollonius of Tyre serves as a reminder of how stories evolve, shaped by the hands of those who tell them. His tale, with its mix of adventure and romance, invites us to explore not just the past, but the very nature of storytelling itself. It's a testament to the power of narrative to transform reality, to take the ordinary and make it extraordinary. And as we continue to unravel the threads of his story, we're left with the tantalizing question: where does the myth end and the man begin? As we prepare to delve deeper into the legend of Apollonius, it's clear that his story is far from over. The medieval spin on his tale offers a fascinating glimpse into the values and aspirations of a bygone era. And while the reality of his life might have been as gritty as the sand beneath his ship, the legend remains as captivating as ever, a reminder of the enduring power of storytelling to shape our understanding of history. So here we are, at the tail end of Apollonius's saga, with the threads of fact and fiction tangled like a pair of earbuds in a pocket. The real question isn't just why his story lingers, but why it refuses to fade into obscurity like an old cassette tape. The tale of Apollonius of Tyre is a classic case of history's greatest pastime, myth-making. Humans, it seems, are as fond of spinning stories as a spider is of weaving webs, and Apollonius's legend is a testament to our undying love for a good yarn. First, let's talk about the allure of the Apollonius myth. It's got all the trimmings of a blockbuster, drama, intrigue, a pinch of romance, and more shipwrecks than a nautical disaster film. Medieval audiences gobbled it up like it was the latest season of the hottest TV show. But here's the kicker. His story endures not because it's true, but because it speaks to something fundamental in us all, the desire for transformation and redemption. In a world where the average lifespan was about 30 years if you were lucky, tales of overcoming adversity were more than entertainment, they were hope served with a side of escapism. Now, the legend of Apollonius serves as a mirror to the societies that told it, reflecting their ideals and fears back at them. When the story morphed in medieval Europe, it became a tale of chivalric romance, a genre as historically accurate as a medieval knight on a jet ski. Yet, this makeover was less about historical fidelity and more about selling tickets. Stories had to resonate with the values of the time. The medieval version of Apollonius was a noble hero, a character who rose from exile to reclaim his rightful place, embodying the aspirational fantasies of a rigidly hierarchical society. But let's not forget the harsh realities underlying this narrative. The Mediterranean world was a tough neighborhood. Economic pressures were as relentless as the tides. Tyre's economy, for instance, was as dependent on its purple dye trade as a modern tech company is on innovation. Control of trade routes was as crucial as oxygen, and losing them could sink a city faster than a lead balloon. In this context, Apollonius's maritime escapades were not just romantic adventures, but reflections of the very real stakes of ancient commerce. Politically, the era was a Game of Thrones long before the Starks and Lannisters made it cool. City-states, empires, and kingdoms jolted for power like contestants on a chaotic reality show. Apollonius, if he existed, would have been a pawn in these political chess matches, his story a convenient allegory for the tumultuous power dynamics of his age. Medieval adaptations of his tale, however, glossed over these gritty details in favour of noble quests and courtly love, perhaps because real politics were as appealing as a bucket of cold porridge. The social context of the time adds another layer to this historical onion. In an era when literacy was a rare privilege and most folks were more concerned with surviving the next plague than pondering existential truths, stories like that of Apollonius offered a form of cultural coherence. They were the ancient equivalent of a community potluck where everyone brought their own flavour to the narrative tapestry. This communal storytelling was less about accuracy and more about creating a shared identity, a cultural glue that held societies together through the storms of history. Yet, as captivating as the legend is, it's crucial to peel back the layers and acknowledge the reality. Apollonius was likely a fictional construct, a story that evolved to suit the needs of its audience. His tale is a reminder that history is often written by those with the most compelling narrative, not necessarily the most facts. It's a cautionary tale about the seductive power of myth and the ease with which fact can be overshadowed by fiction when the latter makes for a better story. So, what's the takeaway from the saga of Apollonius of Tyre? It's a testament to the enduring power of storytelling, an art as ancient as humanity itself. His story, with its mix of adventure and romance, speaks to our collective imagination and our desire to find meaning in the chaos of history. It reminds us that while the facts may fade, the impact of a good story can last for centuries, shaping our perceptions and values in ways that are as profound as they are intangible. In the end, Apollonius's legacy is not just in the tales told about him, but in the way those tales reflect our own times and experiences. His story is a bridge between the past and present, a narrative that invites us to ponder not just where we've been, but where we're going. It's an invitation to engage with history, not as a static record, but as a living, breathing dialogue. A reminder that the stories we tell are as much about us as they are about the figures we immortalize. The legend of Apollonius of Tyre endures because it speaks to the timeless themes of adventure, redemption, and the search for identity. It resonates with our human need to understand ourselves and our world through the stories we create. In a way, Apollonius is every one of us, navigating the unpredictable seas of life, guided by the stars of our own myths. And as long as there are stories to tell, his tale will continue to captivate, challenge, and inspire. After all, in the grand theatre of history, we're all just players, and Apollonius of Tyre is a role that will never go out of style. You're standing in the rolling landscapes of 1st century BC Gaul, a land that's more than just a backdrop for Asterix's antics. Gaul, the sprawling region that makes up what we now call France, Luxembourg, Belgium, and bits of Switzerland, Italy, the Netherlands, and Germany. Geographically speaking, it's diverse. You've got everything from dense forests to open fields, a variety of terrains perfect for both farming and ancient tribal skirmishes. You, my friend, are a tribal leader here, balancing politics like a juggler with way too many flaming torches. First, let's talk tribes. Gaul's not a single entity, it's a mosaic of around 60 tribes, each with its own customs and dialects. You're leading one of these tribes, likely part of a larger tribal confederation. Think of it as a network of frenemies bound together by mutual interests. There's the Averni, the Aedui, and the Sequani, among others, each with its own agenda and thirst for power. As a leader, you're not just managing your tribe, but also navigating these complex alliances. It's like ancient speed dating, except the stakes are land, cattle, and lives. Now, if you've heard tales of Asterix, you might picture yourself with a winged helmet, ready to outsmart Roman legionaries with a magic potion. Hate to burst your bubble, but the real potion here is diplomacy mixed with a good dash of intimidation. Your toolkit includes managing resources, negotiating alliances, and occasionally leading the charge into battle. Sorry, no get-a-fix to brew you an easy win. The Druids, though, aren't just figments of comic books. They're the spiritual and intellectual elite, wielding influence like an ancient blend of clergy, philosopher, and political advisor. They control knowledge and rituals, and their blessing or curse can sway your tribe's morale. You need them on your side, or at least not against you. They're your PR department, your think tank, and sometimes your diplomatic backchannel. But let's not get too cozy with romanticized notions. Power isn't a cushy seat on a throne. It's more like standing on a seesaw during an earthquake. You're constantly worried about Roman incursions. Those Romans, led by ambitious generals like Julius Caesar, are eyeing your fertile lands and rich resources. They're the neighbors who keep borrowing sugar but never give it back, except they're borrowing your territory. The threat of Roman expansion is as omnipresent as Caesar's ego. In 58 BC, Caesar began his Gallic Wars, aiming to bring Gaul under Roman control. Spoiler alert, he's annoyingly successful at it. Your day-to-day life involves a lot of decision-making. It's not just about leading warriors into battle, but also about ensuring that your people have food, shelter, and a sense of security. You're part politician, part military commander, and part community leader. You're hosting feasts to keep morale high and resolve disputes before they turn into full-blown feuds. You're also handling trade, which is crucial. Gaulish tribes trade extensively, not just with each other, but with Roman markets, exchanging goods like salt, wine, and metalwork. Trade brings wealth, but it also brings cultural exchange and a stark reminder of Roman influence creeping into your world. Now, about those day-to-day struggles, it's not just external threats. Internal power plays keep you on your toes. You've got rival factions within your tribe, each with its own ambitions. Your own position isn't as secure as a rock. It's more like a sandcastle with the tide coming in. Leadership requires constant vigilance. One misstep, and a rival might just swoop in like a hawk on a hare. And then there's the weather. No, seriously. A bad harvest because of unfavourable weather can lead to famine, unrest, and a power shift faster than you can say hailstorm. Maintaining power requires you to be pragmatic, shrewd, and sometimes ruthless. You need to ensure that your tribe is not just surviving but thriving, or at least appearing to thrive, to keep those rivals at bay. Let's talk about the architecture of power for a moment. Your home isn't exactly a palace. It's more of a fortified farmhouse. Think sturdy wood, a thatched roof, and walls made of wattle and daub. It's functional, but not exactly luxury living. Your office is wherever you happen to be holding court, sometimes literally a court, as in a clearing or a large tent. It's a far cry from the marble halls of Rome, but it gets the job done. In terms of governance, it's not all top-down. You've got a council of elders or nobles who advise and sometimes challenge you. It's a bit like herding cats if each cat had its own army and hidden agenda. Decisions are often reached by consensus, but there's always that undercurrent of competition, a constant game of chess where you're one move away from checkmate. And while you don't have a magic potion, you do have something akin to it. Your charisma and ability to inspire loyalty among your people. It's your biggest asset, one that can't be bartered or traded. It's what keeps your people rallying behind you when the Romans are knocking at the proverbial door. So here you are, a tribal leader in 1st century BC Gaul, juggling the demands of leadership with the ever-present threat of Roman expansion. You're navigating alliances and rivalries, balancing power and diplomacy, all while trying to maintain the prosperity and security of your tribe. It's a tough gig, but hey, someone's got to do it, and that someone is you. Welcome to the real life of a Gaulish leader, where history is less about comic book heroics and more about the gritty, relentless pursuit of survival and power. Now, let's pivot to the economic reality of being a tribal leader in 1st century BC Gaul, because let's face it, even back then, money, or the lack of it, made the world go round. Your economy isn't just about having enough cattle and grain to feed your people. It's a complex web of trade, barter, and the looming shadow of Roman coinage. You're not just a warlord, you're also the CFO of a makeshift corporate entity. Forget spreadsheets, you're dealing in salt and silver. Trade in your world is less about Wall Street and more about muddy paths and barter. You've got a thriving exchange system where goods fly around faster than gossip at a Roman bathhouse. The star player? Salt. This isn't just seasoning your food, it's the cornerstone of your economy. It preserves food, which is a game changer in a world without refrigerators. A sack of salt could be worth its weight in gold, or, in this case, iron swords or wine barrels. Salt from the mines in Hallstatt or the marshes of Brittany is a hot commodity, and you're making sure your tribe has access to this white gold. And speaking of gold, let's address those Roman coins. The Romans are like the annoying tech startup that's disrupting your traditional market. They're pushing their shiny coins into your barter system, and while you might resist at first, the allure of standardized currency is hard to ignore. Roman coins are like the iPhones of the ancient world. Everyone wants one, and soon enough, you've got to have it to stay competitive. By the time Julius Caesar is done with Gaul, Roman currency is as common as dirt, and you're either adapting or getting left behind. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Back to bartering. This is where your charisma really shines. You're like an ancient car salesman, trading goods with other tribes and Roman merchants. You're swapping furs from the Ardennes for Mediterranean olive oil, trading your tribe's metalwork for Iberian horses. You're all about those win-win deals, but you've got to watch out for the occasional swindle. Being a sharp trader is just as important as being a fierce warrior. Now, here's where things get even more interesting, the role of women in your economy. Far from being sidelined, Gaulish women are active in trade and commerce. They're not just sitting by the hearth, they're running the market stalls, organizing trade caravans, and sometimes even managing estates. You've got women who are so good at haggling, they could sell sand in the Sahara. They're the unsung heroes of your economy, making sure the wheels of trade keep turning. Managing your tribe's resources isn't just about trade, though. You're also overseeing agriculture, ensuring that the fields produce enough grain and vegetables to keep your people fed. A bad harvest can spell disaster, so you're always keeping an eye on the skies, praying to the gods for favorable weather. You're storing surplus in granaries, preparing for the lean times like a squirrel hoarding nuts for winter. This brings us to the myth of the wealthy chieftain. Sure, you've got your hoards of treasures, bronze torques, iron weapons, maybe even a few Roman coins. But wealth isn't just about bling. It's about the ability to mobilize resources, to keep your tribe fed and clothed, to pay your warriors and still have enough left to impress visiting dignitaries. Real wealth is the power to influence and inspire loyalty. That's why your feasts are legendary. They're not just meals, they're displays of power and prosperity, a way to show that you've got what it takes to lead. And let's not forget the vital role of the druids in your economy. These guys are more than just mystics. They're your advisors, helping manage resources and offering counsel on when to sow and harvest. They're interpreting omens, helping you make decisions that could make or break your tribe's fortunes. If they say it's a bad year for trading with the Sequani, you listen. Ignoring a druid's advice is like ignoring a storm warning. Do it at your peril. Trade routes are your tribe's arteries, pumping lifeblood into your economic system. Gaul is a crossroads of Europe, with goods flowing from the Mediterranean to the Atlantic, from the Alps to the Pyrenees. You're smack dab in the middle of it all, with Roman roads starting to crisscross the land like a spider's web. These roads are a mixed blessing. They bring trade and prosperity, but they also bring Roman soldiers and taxes. You're navigating these new dynamics like a pro, trying to reap the benefits while dodging the pitfalls. The introduction of the Roman economy into your world is both a threat and an opportunity. You're dealing with tariffs and taxes, Roman merchants who drive hard bargains, and the ever-present threat of Roman legions who do not understand the concept of no returns, no refunds. You've got to be shrewd, using Roman wealth to your advantage while maintaining the independence of your tribe. All this economic activity isn't happening in a vacuum. It's part of the larger political landscape, a game of chess where trade is just one piece on the board. Every deal, every barter is a move in this game, and you're playing to win. You're not just a tribal leader, you're a master strategist, ensuring that your tribe doesn't just survive, but thrives in this complex world. The romantic vision of the wealthy chieftain sitting on a pile of gold is just that, a vision. The reality is far more gritty, more nuanced. It's about balance, diplomacy, and a little bit of luck. You're not just in it for the glory, you're in it for the long haul, building a legacy that will endure even when the Romans finally take over. And trust me, that's a story for another day. So, we've been talking about how you're essentially the CEO of your tribe, juggling trade like a circus performer. But let's switch gears and dive into the social tapestry of 1st century BC Gaul, because, surprise, surprise, it's not just about the economy, stupid. It's about people, hierarchies, and those mystical druids, the OG influences of your time. First up, let's unravel the social classes. Forget about neat little categories like upper, middle, and lower. Gaulish society is more like a layered cake, with each slice having its own distinct flavor. Sitting at the top, you've got the nobles, your compadres in the tribal leadership club. These folks are the aristocrats and warriors, holding land and wielding swords with equal prowess. They're the ones with the fancy talks, the chunky neck jewelry that screams, "I've got power and I know how to use it." Next, we have the free men, the backbone of your tribe. These are the artisans, farmers, and traders, doing the grunt work that keeps everything ticking along. They're not nobility, but they've got rights and a say in the tribal assembly, or the comitia. Think of it as your local town hall meeting, but with a lot more shouting and the occasional brawl. These assemblies are where decisions are made, alliances are forged, and occasionally grudges are nursed like a fine wine. Then there's the clienteler, a class of dependents who are bound to the nobles. It's like a medieval LinkedIn connection, where loyalty gets you protection and a slice of noble patronage. These clients work the land, fight in skirmishes, and generally support their noble patrons in exchange for security. It's all very quid pro quo, help me keep my power, and I'll make sure you're not starving come winter. Now, let's address the slaves. Yes, Gaul did have slaves, often war captives or those who fell on hard times and were sold into servitude. But here's the kicker. Gaulish slavery isn't quite the brutal chattel slavery of later Roman times. Slaves in Gaul could own property, marry, and even earn their freedom. It's more akin to indentured servitude, though let's not romanticize it. Being a slave still meant your life wasn't your own. All right, on to the warriors. In Gaul, being a warrior is not just a job, it's a lifestyle choice. These guys are the rock stars of the tribe, their status determined by their bravery in battle, and, oddly enough, their hair. Yep, the more elaborate the hairstyle, the higher the rank. Think of it as a visible resume. Warriors are your tribe's heavy metal band, and they love nothing more than getting into skirmishes with rival tribes or the odd Roman legionary looking for trouble. They fight with swords, spears, and a whole lot of bravado, backed by war chants that could give any stadium anthem a run for its money. Let's not forget the Druids, those enigmatic figures wrapped in mystique and mistletoe. They're the intellectual elite, the walking Wikipedia of the ancient world. They study for up to 20 years, memorizing everything from tribal laws to celestial phenomena. Druids act as judges, teachers, and advisors, like a Swiss Army knife of ancient roles. Now, if you're picturing them as robe-wearing magicians with a penchant for human sacrifice, hold your horses. The whole sacrifice thing is mostly Roman propaganda, designed to paint the Gauls as barbaric. While it's true that some rituals involved animal sacrifices, there's little evidence to support widespread human offerings. In reality, Druids are more likely to be found deliberating over laws than dancing around a bonfire with a sacrificial dagger. And here's a fun fact, Druids don't write down their teachings. Everything is passed orally, preserving knowledge through generations. It's like the ultimate game of telephone, except the message actually stays the same. This oral tradition is their way of keeping knowledge exclusive, a bit like having the only copy of a best-selling novel and refusing to publish it. Now, let's talk about some cultural practices. Feasting, for instance, is a big deal. These aren't your average Sunday roasts. They're full-blown extravaganzas complete with music, storytelling, and, occasionally, competitive boasting. It's a chance to cement alliances, resolve disputes, and show off your tribe's prosperity. The best part? Everyone's invited. It's a communal affair, reinforcing social bonds like an ancient Facebook event, only with real faces. The Gauls also have their own version of the Olympic Games. No, not curling or synchronized swimming, sorry. These are athletic contests and horse races. Events that showcase physical prowess and bring the tribe together. Winning glory in these games is almost as prestigious as winning in battle, ensuring that the warriors stay fit and the spectators entertained. So, what about religion? The Gauls worship a pantheon of gods, each overseeing different aspects of life, from Tyrannis, the god of thunder, to Epona, the horse goddess. Their religion is deeply intertwined with nature, respecting the cycles of the earth and the seasons. Sacred groves serve as their temples, where they conduct rituals and ceremonies. It's a bit like having church outdoors, with a lot more trees and a lot less stained glass. And while we're on the subject of myths, let's debunk the one about the Gauls being uncivilized brutes. Archaeological evidence shows that they have sophisticated craftsmanship with intricately designed metalwork and pottery. They've got trade networks that stretch across Europe, and their art isn't just functional, it's beautiful. Gaulish society is complex, adaptive, and far from the primitive image sometimes conjured by their Roman conquerors. As for law and order, it's mostly handled by the Druids and tribal leaders. Disputes are settled by arbitration, fines, or, if things get heated, a good old-fashioned duel. Justice is more restorative than punitive, focusing on compensation rather than imprisonment. It's like Judge Judy meets Game of Thrones with a touch of druidic mediation. In the grand tapestry of history, Gaulish culture is vibrant, dynamic, and far more intricate than the Romans would have you believe. You're not just a leader, you're part of a rich cultural legacy, navigating a world of complex social structures and vibrant traditions. So, while you might not have the marble columns of Rome or the sprawling forums of Greece, what you do have is a society steeped in tradition, innovation, and a touch of mystery. And let's face it, that's a story worth telling, just as soon as we tackle the inevitable Roman invasion. But that's a cliffhanger for another day. Just when you thought Gaulish life couldn't get any more dramatic, the Romans waltz in with their legions and laurel crowns, ready to turn your world upside down. Enter Julius Caesar, the original overachiever, whose ambitions make your tribal spats look like playground squabbles. Caesar's eyes are set on Gaul like a kid in a candy store, and he's got the resources to take what he wants. His Gallic Wars, kicking off in 58 BC, are a masterclass in military strategy and political maneuvering. But let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. Picture the scene. Rome is the superpower of the Mediterranean, flexing its muscles and looking to expand its influence. Gaul, with its fertile lands and rich resources, is the next logical step. The Romans aren't just after land, they're after glory, wealth, and an empire that stretches from the sunny shores of Spain to the misty isles of Britannia. Caesar's campaign through Gaul is nothing short of a military juggernaut. He's got legions at his command, each one around 5,000 soldiers strong, armed to the teeth with gladii and pilums, ready to carve their way through tribal lands. The Roman legions are like a well-oiled machine, disciplined and relentless, while the Gaulish tribes are more like a flash mob, energetic, spontaneous, but sometimes a bit chaotic. It's a clash of styles, and Caesar's playing chess while most are stuck on checkers. Now, let's talk alliances, because in Gaul, they're as stable as a soap opera romance. The tribes are caught in a web of friendships and rivalries, each with its own agenda. Take the Aedui, for example. They're Rome's BFFs in Gaul, at least for a while. They see the Romans as a means to an end, a way to curb the influence of rival tribes like the Sequani. But here's the kicker. Alliances with Rome are a double-edged sword. Sure, you get protection, but you also get Roman taxes, Roman laws, and Roman soldiers who never seem to leave. Enter Vercingetorix, the Gaulish leader who decides he's had enough of Rome's imperialistic swagger. In 52 BC, he unites the fractious tribes in a rebellion that's equal parts bold and desperate. Vercingetorix is like the rock star of resistance, rallying the tribes with promises of freedom and glory. But uniting the Gauls is like herding cats through a field of laser pointers, a logistical nightmare, but he gives it a shot. He's charismatic, strategic, and a bit of a gambler, betting on a grand showdown to expel the Romans. Now, let's debunk the myth of the noble savage standing up to the empire. Vercingetorix isn't just a freedom fighter, he's a savvy politician playing a high-stakes game. His rebellion isn't just about liberation, it's about power, prestige, and the hope of uniting Gaul under his leadership. The Battle of Gergovia, where Vercingetorix scores a rare victory against Caesar, is a testament to his tactical prowess. But let's be real. His success is less about divine intervention and more about exploiting Roman overconfidence. Of course, every hero needs a nemesis, and Caesar is more than up for the role. He's not just fighting for Rome, he's fighting for his political future. Back in Rome, political rivals are sharpening their knives, and Caesar knows that victories in Gaul could cement his legacy. The climactic Battle of Alesia is where it all comes to a head. Vercingetorix is holed up in a hilltop fortress, surrounded by Caesar's forces. It's a siege that would make Hollywood directors weep with envy. Caesar builds 2 massive walls around Alesia to keep reinforcements out and the besieged Gauls in. It's a move worthy of a Bond villain, and it works. Vercingetorix is eventually forced to surrender, marking the end of organized resistance in Gaul. But let's not paint this as a simple tale of conquest. Gaul's defeat is as much about internal division as it is about Roman might. The tribes are fragmented, each one eyeing the other with suspicion. For every Vercingetorix, there's an opportunistic chieftain ready to cut a deal with Caesar. The realpolitik of the time is brutal alliances form and dissolve faster than you can say imperium. It's a world where loyalty is a currency, traded and spent with ruthless pragmatism. Caesar's conquest of Gaul isn't just a military victory, it's a masterclass in divide and conquer. By fostering rivalries and playing tribes against each other, he ensures there's no unified front to challenge Rome. It's a strategy that's as cunning as it is effective, and it sets the stage for Rome's transformation of Gaul into a Roman province. The aftermath of the Gallic Wars is a mixed bag. For the Romans, it's a triumph that fills their coffers and extends their influence. For the Gauls, it's a time of upheaval and transformation. Roman culture begins to seep into the fabric of Gaulish society. Latin replaces Celtic languages in official settings, Roman roads crisscross the landscape, and Roman law becomes the new norm. But beneath this veneer of Romanization, the old ways endure. The Gauls are nothing if not resilient, and their cultural identity remains a vibrant undercurrent in the Roman province. And what about Vercingetorix? The once mighty chieftain is paraded through Rome in chains as part of Caesar's triumph, a grim reminder of the cost of resistance. He's later executed, a fate that underscores the harsh realities of power and conquest. But his legacy lives on, a symbol of defiance and the complexities of Gaulish identity in the face of Roman domination. In the grand tapestry of history, the story of Gaul and Rome is more than just a tale of conquest. It's a saga of ambition, resilience, and the ever-shifting sands of power. The Gauls may have lost the battle for independence, but their spirit endures, a testament to the enduring complexity of human history. And as we draw close to the end of this chapter, it's worth remembering that history isn't just about victors and vanquished. It's about the stories we tell, the myths we create, and the truths we uncover along the way. Stay tuned, because the echoes of Gaulish resistance will reverberate through the ages, shaping the course of history in ways we're still discovering. But the Gauls, those tenacious tribes, are not just footnotes in Caesar's grand narrative. They're the survivors, the ones who managed to adapt, adopt, and sometimes outright resist the cultural tsunami that is Romanization. You see, Rome might have conquered Gaul, but it didn't erase it. Instead, it painted over it, like an artist adding layers to an old canvas, creating a new work that still bore traces of the original masterpiece underneath. As Roman legions settled in, Gaulish society underwent a metamorphosis. The old tribal structures didn't vanish overnight. They morphed into something that made sense under Roman rule. Gallic chieftains became Roman duumvirs, or curatorea, local magistrates who maintained a semblance of their former authority while keeping the peace and the taxes flowing to Rome. It's like going from being the CEO of a scrappy startup to a middle manager in a sprawling corporation. Sure, you've got less autonomy, but the perks? Oh, they come with Roman baths and aqueducts. Speaking of infrastructure, Roman roads began to crisscross Gaul like veins pumping trade and culture into the heart of the province. These roads were engineering marvels, straight, durable, and efficient, stretching over 12,000 miles across Gaul alone. They transformed the landscape, connecting previously isolated communities and turning Gaul into a bustling hub of trade and commerce. Now, a trip from Lugdunum, modern-day Lyon, to Lutetia, Paris, wasn't a perilous journey, but a manageable 300-mile trek that could be done in a matter of days. These thoroughfares weren't just about logistics. They were Rome's way of saying, "You're one of us now, like it or not." With roads came trade, and with trade came Roman goods and ideas. Gaulish markets buzzed with the chatter of Latin mixed with Celtic tongues, as Roman pottery, wine, and olive oil found their way onto Gallic tables. The Gauls developed a taste for Roman luxury, yet they clung to their own traditions, giving rise to a unique Gallo-Roman culture. Picture a banquet where Roman dishes are served alongside wild boar and Gallic stews, history's version of fusion cuisine. Religion, too, was a realm of blending and borrowing. Roman gods were introduced, but the Gauls didn't just abandon their deities. Instead, they found common ground, equating their gods with Roman ones. Taranis, the thunder god, found a Roman counterpart in Jupiter, and Epona, the beloved horse goddess, trotted alongside the Roman pantheon. This syncretism wasn't just theological sleight of hand. It was a survival strategy, a way to maintain cultural identity while embracing the inevitable change. But what about those druidic sages, the keepers of Celtic wisdom? Their influence waned under Roman rule, as the Druids were sidelined in favour of Roman priests and officialdom. Yet, like an underground current, their knowledge persisted, passed down in whispers and folk traditions that would later seep into the medieval legends of Merlin and the Arthurian myths. While the Roman Empire sought to impose order and orthodoxy, it couldn't fully extinguish the flickering flame of Celtic spirituality. Economically, Roman rule brought both prosperity and challenges. Roman taxation was like the ancient equivalent of today's IRS, ensuring that every denarius was accounted for. Yet, The economic integration into the Roman world meant access to broader markets, bringing wealth to those who could navigate this new system. Gaulish artisans found demand for their metalwork and crafts in the far reaches of the empire, from Britannia to the sands of Egypt. In terms of social dynamics, Roman law introduced new concepts of citizenship and legal rights, reshaping Gaulish society. By 212 AD, the Edict of Caracalla granted Roman citizenship to all free men within the empire, blurring the lines between conqueror and conquered. This was a game-changer, offering Gauls a stake in the Roman system, allowing them to rise through the military ranks or engage in the empire's bureaucratic machinery. Yet, the story of Gaul under Roman rule is not just one of assimilation, it's a testament to resilience. Gaulish identity didn't vanish, it evolved. The legacy of the tribal leaders, those stalwart figures of resistance and adaptation, lived on in the hearts and minds of the people. Their stories, passed down through generations, became the stuff of legend, tales of heroism and defiance, of cunning strategies and lost causes. Fast forward a few centuries, and these stories would inspire the likes of Clovis and Charlemagne, medieval rulers who looked to their Gallic forebears as models of leadership in turbulent times. The spirit of Vercingetorix and his fellow chieftains echoed through the ages, a reminder that even in defeat there is dignity and strength. Today we remember the Gauls not just for their valiant resistance, but for their remarkable ability to adapt and thrive in the face of overwhelming odds. They remind us that history is not just a list of dates and battles, but a tapestry of human experiences, of cultures meeting, clashing, and ultimately weaving together to create something new. In the grand narrative of European history, the Gauls are the underdogs who refuse to be written off. Their legacy is a testament to the enduring power of cultural identity and the resilience of the human spirit in the face of change. So, while the Romans may have had their triumphs and their empires, it's the Gauls and their indomitable spirit that continue to capture our imaginations. After all, history isn't just written by the victors, it's remembered by the survivors. In the highlands of the Andes, where the air is thin and the landscape is a dramatic display of peaks and valleys, the Incan story begins with a single thread. Now, before you roll your eyes and think this is just another yarn about ancient civilizations, let me assure you, this one's got more twists than a 1,000-thread count sheet. We're talking about a culture where weaving wasn't just a hobby for rainy days. It was an art form, a currency, and even a social status symbol. The Incas didn't mess around when it came to textiles. They spun their first threads around 3000 BCE, and it wasn't long before they were weaving a legacy that would wrap around the Andes like one of their own colourful mantles. You see, the Incas were pretty savvy when it came to making the most of what they had, and by what they had, I mean alpacas and llamas. These fluffy creatures weren't just there for the cute Instagram pics, no, they were the backbone of Incan weaving. Their fibres were the raw material for everything from everyday clothing to elaborate ceremonial garments. And let's be honest, who wouldn't want to snuggle up in an alpaca sweater on a chilly Andean night? It's like Mother Nature's version of a heated blanket. Now, the harsh geography of the Andes might seem like a bit of a nightmare for a culture trying to thrive, but for the Incas, it was like having a giant, natural textile workshop. The diverse climates created by those towering mountains meant different regions could produce a variety of fibres and dyes. So, while one village might specialize in spinning the finest llama wool, another might be perfecting the art of dyeing it in shades that would put a rainbow to shame. This was the original colour blocking, folks, long before it hit the runways of Paris or Milan. But here's where it gets interesting. Textiles weren't just about keeping warm or looking stylish for the Incas. These woven wonders were the lifeblood of their economy. Forget coins or paper money. In the Inca Empire, cloth was currency. Want to pay your taxes? Better have some quality fabric on hand. Need to show the emperor just how loyal you are? A finely woven tunic might just do the trick. It was a world where the loom was as powerful as any printing press, and a skilled weaver could command the kind of respect usually reserved for rock stars or tech moguls today. While we're busting myths, let's tackle the romantic notion of the Incan weaver as some solitary artisan labouring away in a sun-drenched workshop. The reality? Weaving was a communal activity, often done in groups where everyone from young apprentices to seasoned masters would contribute. Picture it like a modern-day startup, collaborative, bustling, and always pushing the boundaries of what's possible. And if you think the Incas weren't serious about their textiles, consider this. They had entire state-run workshops dedicated to producing cloth. It wasn't just art, it was industry. What's truly fascinating is how this humble thread became a tool of power and politics. The Sapa Inca, the emperor himself, used textiles as a way to enforce his rule and spread his influence. Need to win over a newly conquered tribe? Send them some of the finest woven goods as a goodwill gesture. Want to keep the elite on your side? Gift them exclusive garments that scream prestige. In a sense, textiles were the original spin doctors, crafting narratives and shaping perceptions across the empire. So, next time you throw on a sweater or wrap a scarf around your neck, remember that you're part of a tradition that stretches back thousands of years. The Incas might not have had smartphones or social media influences, but they knew how to weave a story, one that started with a simple thread and became a tapestry of culture, power, and innovation. And that, my friends, is the real fabric of history. Now let's dive deeper into the colourful tapestry of Incan society, where textiles weren't just threads, but the very fibre of political power. Picture the Sapa Inca, the emperor of this vast Andean empire, strutting around in garments that were less about keeping warm and more about making a statement. And I'm not talking about just any statement, these were power plays woven into fabric. Each stitch, each colour, each pattern was a proclamation of dominance. If Instagram had existed in the 15th century, the Sapa Inca's wardrobe would have been the ultimate influencer account, with every post a humble brag about wealth and control. Let's be honest though, when you hear emperor's new clothes, your mind might drift to fairy tales, but this was no fable. The Sapa Inca's garments were the real deal, crafted from the finest materials, dyed in colours that screamed opulence, and adorned with patterns that told the stories of his conquests and divine right to rule. These weren't just clothes, they were wearable propaganda. Imagine strutting around in a cloak that not only kept you warm in those chilly Andean nights, but also subtly reminded everyone around you of your absolute power. Now that's what I call fashion with a purpose. But let's not forget the real maestros behind these masterpieces, the Aklas, or chosen women. These ladies were basically the Coco Chanels of the Incan world, and their workshops were the haute couture houses of the Andes. But before you get too starry-eyed, let's bust a myth. The life of an Akala wasn't all glamorous fashion shows and celebrity status. These women were chosen for their skill, beauty, or noble birth, and whisked away to live in seclusion, dedicated to the sacred art of weaving for the rest of their lives. It was a life of privilege, yes, but also one of obligation. Think of it as a high-stakes Project Runway, where the stakes were more than just getting voted off the island. They were about maintaining the emperor's image and the empire's stability. The Akalas were responsible for producing the finest textiles, reserved for the emperor himself and the highest echelons of society. Their work was meticulous, demanding, and, let's face it, a bit like trying to knit a sweater while balancing on a unicycle. These textiles weren't just about looking good, they were about maintaining the cosmic order. The Incas believed that the Sapa Inca was a living god, and his clothing needed to reflect that celestial status. So, if you ever doubted the power of fashion, just remember that in the Incan Empire, a well-made tunic could quite literally hold the universe together. But here's where it gets really interesting. The textiles produced by the Akalas weren't just for show, they were political tools. The emperor would gift these precious fabrics to cement alliances, reward loyalty, and even pacify conquered peoples. Imagine receiving a beautifully woven garment that not only kept you cozy, but also served as a reminder of your subjugation. It was a subtle, yet powerful way of saying, "Welcome to the empire. Enjoy your stay." In this way, textiles became the language of diplomacy, the soft power that could sway hearts and minds without a single sword being drawn. And while we're busting myths, let's tackle the idea that these textiles were purely works of art. Sure, they were beautiful, but they were also functional. The patterns and colors used in Incan textiles were loaded with meaning, representing everything from the emperor's lineage to the divine favor he enjoyed. These were clothes that spoke volumes, a silent yet powerful form of communication that transcended language barriers and cultural divides. So, while you might think that a piece of cloth is just a piece of cloth, in the hands of the Incas, It was a tool of empire building, a conduit of power, and a testament to human creativity. Now, before you start thinking that the world of Incan textiles was all about luxury and leisure, let's add a dose of reality. The production of these garments was a labor-intensive process, requiring the skills of not only the Akellas, but also entire communities. From the shearing of alpacas and llamas, to the spinning of fibers and the dyeing of threads, each step was a communal effort. It was an industry in every sense of the word, and the Incas were masters at organizing labor to achieve their goals. This wasn't just art for art's sake, it was a well-oiled machine, a testament to the empire's ability to harness human potential and natural resources. So, next time you wrap yourself up in a cozy blanket or slip into a warm sweater, take a moment to appreciate the rich history woven into every thread. The Incas might not have had the technology we do today, but they understood the power of textiles in ways that still resonate. They knew that a piece of fabric could be more than just a piece of fabric. It could be a statement, a tool, a weapon. And in a world where the loom was as mighty as the sword, that's a legacy that continues to captivate and inspire. Stay tuned, because this tapestry of history is far from finished. Now, as we unravel the intricate tapestry of Incan textiles, let's dive into the vibrant patterns and symbols that adorn these woven masterpieces. These weren't just pretty designs to make your tunic pop at the next social gathering. No, these were the tweets and hashtags of the ancient Andes, broadcasting stories and social status across the empire without the need for Wi-Fi. Let's start with the basics. The Incas were absolute wizards of symbolism. Each pattern, each color, was a coded message. Think of it like the ultimate secret language, where your tunic could tell tales of your lineage, your hometown, and even your tribe's latest epic feat. We're talking about a culture that loved a good story, and they weren't about to let a little thing like a lack of written language get in the way of their narrative flair. Take, for instance, the ubiquitous checkerboard pattern, or tokapu, that was often seen on the garments of the elite. Far from being a simple fashion choice, these geometric designs were a visual shorthand for power and prestige. Each square could signify a province, a tribute, or even a personal achievement. It was like wearing your resume on your sleeve, except way cooler because it was woven by hand and didn't require a LinkedIn account. And then there were the colors. Oh, the colors! The Incas had a rainbow at their disposal, thanks to the rich natural dyes they concocted from plants, minerals, and insects. Deep reds, vibrant yellows, and lush greens weren't just eye candy, they were loaded with meaning. Red, for instance, wasn't just for show. It symbolized conquest and strength. So, if you saw someone strutting around in a scarlet poncho, you knew they were someone you didn't want to mess with, kind of like the ancient equivalent of a power suit. But let's not get too carried away with the idea that all Incan textiles were cut from the same cloth, so to speak. While this empire was vast, stretching over 2,500 miles along the Andes, from Ecuador down to Chile, its textiles were as diverse as its landscapes. Picture this. Each region had its own flair, its own signature style. The coastal Chimu might favor silver-grey hues derived from seashells, while the highland Quechua went for vivid greens and blues sourced from native plants. It was a textile free-for-all, with every village contributing its own unique touch to the empire's collective wardrobe. And here's another wrinkle in the fabric of Incan society, the myth of uniformity. You see, we often lump the Incas together as a monolithic culture, but in reality they were more like a patchwork quilt of different tribes and traditions. Each group brought its own influences to the weaving table, resulting in a rich tapestry of styles that defied the notion of a single Incan aesthetic. It's a bit like assuming all plaid shirts are the same. Sure, they're all plaid, but a Scottish tartan tells a very different story than a lumberjack flannel. In fact, the Incas were masters at absorbing and adapting the cultural influences of the many peoples they conquered. When they took over a new region, they didn't just impose their own styles, they embraced the local traditions and blended them into their own. This cultural cross-pollination resulted in textiles that were as much a symbol of the empire's diversity as they were of its dominance. So next time you see a traditional Incan pattern, remember, it's likely a mashup of multiple influences, a true testament to the empire's eclectic nature. And now, let's tackle another myth, the idea that these textiles were purely decorative, designed to be admired from afar. The truth is, they were as functional as they were beautiful. Much like your favorite band t-shirt, which tells the world about your impeccable taste in music, Incan textiles were a practical way to communicate identity and status. And let's not forget that they served a crucial economic role, acting as currency and tribute within the empire's vast trading networks. Speaking of economics, here's the kicker. The value of a textile wasn't just in its aesthetic appeal. It was in the labor and skill required to produce it. A simple tunic might take weeks to weave, while an elaborate ceremonial garment could represent months of meticulous work. The finer the textile, the more time and expertise it demanded, making it a luxury item that only the wealthiest could afford. It's a bit like comparing a fast-fashion tee to a bespoke designer gown. The difference in quality and craftsmanship is palpable. So, as we continue to unravel the threads of Incan society, let's keep in mind that textiles were more than just clothing. They were the fabric of life, weaving together stories, status, and the diverse cultures that made up this extraordinary empire. And while we may never fully decode all the messages hidden in those ancient patterns, one thing is clear. The Incas knew how to spin a yarn that was as rich and complex as the Andes themselves. Stay tuned, because this ancient Instagram feed has more stories to tell, and we're just getting started on our journey through the vibrant, textured world of Incan textiles. Now, let's weave our way into the nuts and bolts, or should I say, the warp and weft of Incan textile technology. Imagine an ancient Andean workshop, filled not with the hum of machinery, but the rhythmic clack of looms. At the heart of this operation was the backstrap loom, a deceptively simple yet ingenious tool. Picture a long, narrow loom that allowed a weaver to sit, strap the loom around their back, and create tension with their body weight. It's like a portable gym set, minus the sweaty lycra. This clever contraption was the key to producing those intricate patterns we were raving about earlier. The backstrap loom was a testament to Incan ingenuity, requiring little more than a few sticks and some string. Yet it was capable of producing textiles that could rival the complexity of a modern tapestry. With this tool, weavers could control the tension and precision of each thread, creating textiles that were both durable and delicate. Imagine crafting a fabric that could withstand the harsh Andean winds, yet feel like a whisper against your skin. The loom was more than a tool. It was an extension of the weaver's body and creativity. Now, onto the dyeing process. A rainbow in the making. The Incas were like the original chemists, concocting vibrant dyes from their natural surroundings. They didn't have Pantone color charts, but they did have cochineal insects, which produced a red dye so vivid it could make a fire truck blush. This dye was so valuable that it became a major trade item, centuries before Europeans even knew what a cochineal was. Forget Bitcoin, this was the real red gold. And it wasn't just red that the Incas mastered. They used indigo plants for blues, various barks for browns, and even rare minerals for purples. Despite the absence of modern science, they achieved a palette that could rival any designer's swatchbook. It was a labor-intensive process requiring not only the gathering of materials, but also the meticulous preparation and application of dyes. But for the Incas, the results were worth every painstaking step. The labor behind these textiles was as intricate as the patterns themselves. A single piece of cloth might involve countless hours of spinning, dyeing, and weaving. Let's talk numbers. A finely woven tunic could take several weeks to complete, while a ceremonial textile might demand months of dedicated effort. This wasn't a hobby. It was a full-time job, requiring the kind of commitment you'd expect from a startup founder or an Olympic athlete. And like any good hustle, it came with its own set of challenges and rewards. So, what made these textiles so valuable? It wasn't just the materials or the aesthetics, but the sheer amount of labor and skill involved. The Incas understood that a well-crafted textile was more than just a piece of fabric. It was an investment of time and expertise. It's no wonder these woven treasures became a form of currency, with the finest pieces reserved for the elite. In a way, each garment was a wearable banknote, a testament to the weaver's skill and the owner's status. And let's not forget the environmental impact, or lack thereof. The Incas were eco-friendly before it was chic. They sourced their materials sustainably, using methods that avoided depleting their natural resources. Alpacas and llamas provided fibers without needing to be slaughtered, and plant-based dyes meant that toxic chemicals were a non-issue. It was a closed-loop system. long before the term became a buzzword in sustainability circles. The Incas were also masters of resource management, using the diverse ecosystems of the Andes to their advantage. They practiced crop rotation and managed their herds responsibly, ensuring a steady supply of fibers and dyes. This wasn't just about being kind to Mother Nature, it was a pragmatic approach to survival and prosperity in a challenging environment. In a world where resources were as precious as gold, the Incas knew that a sustainable approach was the key to long-term success. But let's not romanticize too much. While their practices have been dubbed sustainable by today's standards, they were also a necessity born of harsh realities. The Andes weren't exactly a walk in the park, it was adapt or perish. The Incas were nothing if not practical, using their environment to their advantage while ensuring it remained viable for future generations. It's a lesson that still resonates, even if our modern world sometimes forgets it. The environmental savvy of the Incas wasn't just about preservation, it was about legacy. Each textile was a piece of history, a story woven into every thread. And while their techniques may seem primitive by today's standards, they were sophisticated in their understanding of materials and their impact. They didn't just create textiles, they created a sustainable culture, one that thrived for centuries in the shadow of the Andes. So, as we continue to unravel the rich tapestry of Incan society, let's remember that their weaving was more than just an art form. It was a testament to their innovation, their resilience, and their understanding of the world around them. It was a craft that blended beauty with function, art with industry, and tradition with progress. And while the empire may have faded, the legacy of its textiles endures, a reminder of a culture that wove its own destiny with every thread. Stay tuned, because this journey through the warp and weft of history is far from over. There's more to explore, more myths to debunk, and more stories to tell. The Incas may have left us centuries ago, but their threads still hold us in their vibrant, intricate embrace. And speaking of vibrant, intricate embraces, let's fast forward to today, where the legacy of Incan weaving is as alive as a freshly spun yarn. Modern Andean communities are not just preserving these ancient traditions, they're giving them a contemporary twist, like taking a classic rock anthem and remixing it with a modern beat. In the highlands of Peru, Bolivia, and Ecuador, the art of weaving is a tapestry of past and present, where ancient techniques meet modern aesthetics. Take the bustling markets of Cusco, for instance. Here, the descendants of the Incas offer textiles that are both a nod to their ancestors and a wink to the 21st century. These aren't just souvenirs for the casual tourist, they are statements of identity, woven with the same care and skill as their forebears. The designs still echo those of the past, with tokapu patterns making appearances on everything from scarves to wall hangings. But there's also innovation, bold colour combinations, and contemporary patterns that reflect a world that's more globalised than ever. The economic role of these textiles has shifted too. While they once served as currency, today they are vital to the local economy, supporting communities and keeping traditional skills alive. According to the World Bank, artisanal crafts are a significant source of income for over 3 million people across Latin America, with textiles being a major player. It's more than just business. It's a lifeline for many Andean families who rely on the sale of these goods. In a sense, weaving has come full circle, from a form of currency to a means of economic survival. But let's not romanticize the life of a modern weaver. While the image of an artisan working in a sun-drenched workshop has its appeal, the reality can be far more challenging. Access to global markets can be as fickle as the latest fashion trend, and competition is fierce. The rise of mass-produced authentic textiles, often sold at a fraction of the price, threatens the livelihood of traditional weavers. It's a harsh reminder that while the craft is ancient, the challenges faced by its practitioners are very much modern. Yet, amidst these challenges, the cultural importance of weaving remains steadfast. For many Andean communities, textiles are more than just a product. They are a living history. They tell stories of migration, of resilience, of identity. They are a thread that connects the past to the present, a tangible reminder of a heritage that refuses to be forgotten. In a rapidly changing world, where global homogenization threatens to erase local cultures, these textiles stand as a proud symbol of individuality and tradition. The role of women in this narrative cannot be overstated. Much like their Incan predecessors, Women today are the backbone of the weaving industry. They are the keepers of tradition, the teachers of technique, and the innovators of style. In many communities, weaving cooperatives empower women, providing them with economic independence and a platform to share their stories. It's a modern twist on an ancient tale where the loom becomes an instrument of social change. And here's the kicker. While the Incas wove their textiles in service of the empire, today's weavers craft their pieces in service of community and self-expression. The message woven into each garment is no longer dictated by an emperor's decree, but by the weaver's own narrative. It's a democratization of art that would have been unthinkable in the tightly controlled world of the Incas. This brings us to a broader reflection on the legacy of Incan weaving. It's not just about the textiles themselves, but what they represent. They are a testament to human creativity and adaptability, a reminder that art can both preserve and evolve. They challenge us to consider how we value culture and tradition in a world that often prioritizes the new over the enduring, and they invite us to appreciate craftsmanship in an era dominated by mass production. So next time you wrap yourself in a scarf or admire a hand-woven blanket, remember the threads of history that bind us to the past. Think of the Incan weavers who spun their tales with every twist and turn of the loom, and the modern artisans who continue to weave stories of identity and resilience. It's a legacy that transcends time, a reminder that while civilizations may rise and fall, the art of weaving endures. In a world that often seems fragmented and disconnected, these textiles offer a comforting continuity. They remind us that our stories are interwoven, that our past informs our present, and that tradition can be a guide rather than a constraint. The Incas might have been masters of textiles, but their true gift was in understanding the power of a single thread to connect a vast tapestry of human experience. And with that, our journey through the vibrant, textured world of Incan textiles comes to a close. These woven masterpieces have shown us that history is not just a series of dates and facts, but a living narrative, a story spun from the fibers of human ingenuity and resilience. As we wrap up our exploration, let's carry forward the lessons of the Incas, that art can be a currency, a narrative, and a legacy, and that sometimes the most enduring stories are those told not with words, but with threads. In a world where ancient Egypt was the Silicon Valley of civilization, papyrus was the must-have tech gadget, minus the blue light and battery life. Long before our inboxes were clogged with unopened emails, Egyptians were mastering the art of communication on sheets of papyrus, crafted from the lush green stalks sprouting along the Nile Delta. We're talking around 3000 BCE, where life was a little less Wi-Fi and a whole lot more ingenious engineering. You see, the Nile wasn't just a river, it was the lifeblood of Egyptian civilization. Think of it as the original Amazon, minus the next-day delivery, but with a thriving ecosystem that made papyrus production possible. The delta, with its rich alluvial soil, was the perfect nursery for the Cyperus papyrus plant. This wasn't just a plant, it was the MVP of materials, serving as everything from writing surfaces to boats and sandals. Talk about versatility. While modern tech companies are busy reinventing the wheel, the ancient Egyptians were busy inventing, well, paper. Now, let's debunk a myth that's floated around like a dubious papyrus scroll. Contrary to the Hollywood glamorization, papyrus wasn't reserved exclusively for scribes and pharaohs lounging in their gilded palaces, dictating decrees with a flick of their wrists. Nope, it was more of a community affair. While the upper echelons of society were certainly fans of its refined finish, and who could blame them, papyrus was also used by merchants, teachers, and even those annoying neighbors who probably pioneered the junk mail industry. Here's a fun fact. The process of making papyrus was a bit like crafting a fine wine, meticulous and requiring a lot of patience. First, the papyrus plant was harvested and the outer rind was removed. What remained was cut into thin strips, which were then soaked in water. This step was critical because it activated the plant's natural glue. Once the strips were supple and sticky, they were laid out in overlapping layers, one horizontal and one vertical. Think of it as the original cross-platform integration. The sheets were then pressed and dried under the sun, resulting in a smooth surface ready for scribbling hieroglyphs or sketching your next big idea. But let's not romanticize the labor. This wasn't some leisurely craft project. It was sweaty, manual work, often carried out by laborers and artisans who probably felt more like the cogs in the great Egyptian wheel than creators of culture. The papyrus industry was an economic powerhouse, fueling trade and communication across the Mediterranean. It was their version of the internet, connecting people and ideas over vast distances without a single dropped signal. Papyrus sheets could travel hundreds of miles, from the bustling markets of Thebes to the scholarly hubs in Athens, spreading knowledge and, undoubtedly, a bit of gossip. Innovation wasn't just a buzzword for the Egyptians, it was a way of life. They understood that papyrus was more than just a medium, it was a message. And like all good tech, it had its competitors, namely clay tablets and parchment. But let's be honest, lugging around a clay tablet was the ancient equivalent of carrying a desktop computer everywhere you went. Papyrus won over hearts with its portability and ease of use. It was the ancient answer to going paperless, even if it required, well, a lot of paper. The Egyptians didn't just hoard their papyrus prowess, they spread it. By the time the Greeks and Romans caught wind of this papyrus phenomenon, they were hooked. The papyrus trade became as vital as the spice routes, fostering an exchange of not just goods, but ideas. Papyrus was the medium that bore the philosophies of Plato and the poetry of Sappho. If it weren't for these sheets, our understanding of the ancient world would be like reading a book with half the pages missing. In a world where today's tech is tomorrow's trash, papyrus stands as a testament to the enduring power of innovation. It wasn't just about creating a product, it was about creating a legacy. The Egyptians harnessed the very essence of their environment, turning reeds into a revolutionary tool that shaped the way humanity communicated for millennia. So, the next time you accidentally drop your phone and thank the stars for your screen protector, spare a thought for the humble papyrus sheet, the original screen protector of civilization. As we shift gears from the grand legacy of papyrus, let's wade knee-deep into the gritty details of its creation. You might imagine the serene banks of the Nile, but the reality was more sweat and grime than glamour. Picture this. Harvesting papyrus meant wrestling with stalks that could tower up to 15 feet tall. These weren't your garden variety reeds. They were the skyscrapers of the plant world, and cutting them down was no breezy afternoon pastime. The papyrus-making process was an affair as arduous as a gym session, with no air conditioning. Workers, often labourers who knew the Nile's moods like the back of their sunburned hands, would hack away at the base of the plant, wielding sickles with the precision of a chef slicing through a particularly stubborn loaf of sourdough. And let's not forget the lovely backdrop of crocodile-infested waters. Because why settle for a simple workplace hazard when you can add a dash of danger? Once the stalks were in hand, the next step was to strip away the outer rind. This wasn't about peeling a banana. Think more along the lines of dismantling a stubborn corn husk, layer by layer. The reward? The precious inner pith, which was then cut into thin ribbon-like strips. Each strip was the result of meticulous handiwork, like crafting artisanal pasta with a side of river mud. And then the real magic, or drudgery, depending on your perspective, began. You see, these strips weren't just laid out like a Sunday picnic. They were soaked in water to activate the plant's natural adhesive properties, turning limp slices into sticky puzzle pieces. Imagine a soggy jigsaw, except instead of a serene landscape, you're piecing together the ancient world's version of a hard drive. The strips were arranged in 2 layers, horizontal followed by vertical, in a crisscross pattern that would make any basket weaver proud. This was no mere act of whimsy. The crisscrossing provided strength, much like the rebar in modern concrete. The ingenuity here is quite staggering, and it's all done by hands that probably never saw a drop of moisturizer. Pressed under heavy stones and left to dry under the sun's unforgiving glare, these sheets transformed from delicate strips into robust slabs of communication. It was a bit like baking cookies, except the ingredients were botanical and the oven was the Egyptian sun. The result? A smooth, durable surface ready to document everything from tax records to timeless tales. And while we're on the subject of taxes, let's talk economy. Papyrus wasn't just a local darling, it was Egypt's superstar export. The ancient Egyptian economy thrived on the papyrus trade, much like today's world economy hinges on tech exports. By the time papyrus hit the ports, it was essentially the ancient equivalent of hotcakes, albeit with more reeds and significantly less maple syrup. Imagine papyrus sheets travelling from the bustling markets of Alexandria to the intellectual epicenters of Greece and Rome. It was the ancient world's version of an information superhighway, sans the cat videos. With demand soaring, papyrus became a linchpin of Egypt's economic strategy. Its production and trade supported local economies, bringing wealth and goods into the country. In the Mediterranean marketplace, papyrus was as coveted as the latest smartphone is today. But here's the kicker. While we fork over hundreds for our devices, papyrus was relatively inexpensive to produce. This economic model was as savvy as it was sustainable, a testament to the Egyptians' knack for maximizing resources. The papyrus industry didn't just fuel Egypt's economy, it shaped its culture. The very act of writing on papyrus allowed for the proliferation of ideas, stories, laws, and dreams. It was the medium that carried the weight of history, bearing the scribblings of scribes and the musings of philosophers. And while the allure of papyrus is undeniable, let's not sugarcoat the labor. The artisans and laborers who crafted these invaluable sheets often toiled in conditions that were less than ideal, proving once again that innovation is rarely born of leisure. To wrap this up with a little myth-busting, papyrus wasn't some secret kept under lock and key by pharaohs and priests. It was a product of its environment, a testament to human ingenuity, and a catalyst for cultural exchange. So next time you jot down a grocery list, remember the laborious journey of papyrus from the Nile's banks to the scrolls of history. And if you ever feel overwhelmed by your inbox, just be thankful your messages aren't delivered by crocodile-laden river routes. And speaking of crocodile-laden river routes, let's pivot to how papyrus was the original backbone of Egyptian bureaucracy. Imagine a world where the term paperwork was taken quite literally. The production of papyrus wasn't just a fascinating craft, it was a linchpin in the machinery of ancient Egyptian governance. Think of it like this: without papyrus, the entire Egyptian tax system would have been stuck in the mud, or worse, etched painstakingly on clay tablets that weighed more than a sack of grain. In the bustling heart of Egyptian administration, papyrus was the unsung hero, quietly revolutionizing the way taxes were collected and recorded. Picture this. A scribe, the ancient equivalent of a tax accountant, hunched over a fresh sheet of papyrus, quill in hand, meticulously documenting the grain quotas owed by each farmer. These records weren't just kept for kicks, they were vital for maintaining the empire's complex economic structure, which was as layered as a piece of baklava. And while we're on the topic of scribes, let's not forget these characters were the original hipsters of the ancient world. Long before vinyl records made a comeback, scribes were hoarding papyrus scrolls like they were the latest indie band releases, stacking them high in their personal collections. But back to the point, papyrus was more than just tax forms and inventory lists. It was the tool that allowed for the codification of laws, the administration of justice, and the very foundation of education. In a society where literacy was power, papyrus was the medium through which knowledge was transmitted. Imagine young Egyptian students, their heads buried in papyrus scrolls, learning everything from hieroglyphs to the complex mathematics that would later baffle historians. The papyrus sheet was their textbook, their notebook, and their exam paper rolled into one. Education, fueled by papyrus, was the bedrock of Egypt's intellectual growth. In fact, the Temple of Horus in Edfu housed one of the most extensive libraries of its time, filled to the brim with papyrus scrolls on subjects ranging from astronomy to medicine. This wasn't just a collection of dusty scrolls, it was a repository of human knowledge, a place where scholars could dive into the depths of the known world without ever leaving the comfort of their stone benches. And all of this was possible because papyrus was as ubiquitous as sand in the desert, affordable, easily produced, and essential. Now, let's talk competition. While papyrus was cruising down the information superhighway, clay tablets and parchment were desperately trying to keep up. Sure, clay tablets were durable, but they were also cumbersome and as portable as a sack of bricks. Parchment, on the other hand, offered a smoother writing experience, but was far more expensive to produce, requiring the skins of animals, a resource that didn't exactly grow on trees. Papyrus, with its cost-effective production and lightweight nature, was the clear winner in the battle of ancient media. It was the iPad to their Etch-a-Sketch, the Kindle to their hardback. In the bustling markets of Alexandria, papyrus was more than just paper. It was a hot commodity, fueling trade and intellectual exchange. Merchants would barter rolls of papyrus for everything from spices to precious metals, making it an integral part of Egypt's economic tapestry. By 300 BCE, Alexandria had become the epicenter of the papyrus trade, a hub where ideas and goods flowed with equal vigor. And as papyrus traveled across the Mediterranean, so too did Egyptian culture, influencing societies from Greece to Rome. In this competitive market, the papyrus industry was a finely tuned machine, with every cog working in harmony to produce the high-quality sheets that scholars and scribes demanded. The workers who toiled in the papyrus fields, though often overlooked in the grand narrative, were the unsung heroes of this economic engine. They knew that each stalk they harvested contributed to the greater good, helping to fuel an empire that would stand the test of time. But let's not romanticize the scribes too much. Sure, they were the conduits of civilization, the keepers of knowledge, but they were also notorious for their quirks. Picture a scribe, quill in hand, sitting with a smug smile as he pens a decree, all the while thinking, I was using papyrus before it was cool. These were the folks who wouldn't be caught dead using clay tablets. They were all about that papyrus life. They had their own version of the artisanal coffee shop, the scriptorium, where they would gather to discuss the latest philosophical treatises or the juiciest palace gossip, all while meticulously copying texts by candlelight. Scribes were, in many ways, the gatekeepers of information, wielding their papyrus scrolls with the dexterity of a seasoned wordsmith. They were the TikTok influencers of their time, spreading ideas and culture with every stroke of their quill. And while their contemporaries might have rolled their eyes at their papyrus obsession, we owe much of our understanding of ancient civilizations to these dedicated individuals and their penchant for hoarding scrolls. As we continue to unravel the social and political ramifications of papyrus production, it's clear that its impact was as far-reaching as the Nile itself. Papyrus wasn't just a writing surface, it was a catalyst for change, a tool that enabled the Egyptians to build an empire that would echo throughout history. So, the next time you scribble a note or jot down a reminder, take a moment to appreciate the humble papyrus sheet and the remarkable legacy it left behind. We're not done with this story yet, so stay tuned as we dive deeper into the world of papyrus and its enduring influence on the ancient world. As we delve deeper into the papyrus phenomenon, let's shift our gaze from the sun-baked banks of the Nile to the broader Mediterranean stage, where papyrus made its grand entrance as a must-have import, the ancient equivalent of the iPhone X. Egypt, with its monopoly on papyrus production, became a veritable paper superpower. And this wasn't just any old trade. We're talking about a commodity that was the backbone of diplomatic exchanges and scholarly pursuits across empires. Imagine the papyrus scrolls of Egypt fanning out like ancient influences, their influence stretching across seas and cultures. Let's talk trade routes, shall we? Picture bustling ports like Alexandria and Thebes, alive with the buzz of merchants haggling over rolls of papyrus. These sheets were shipped out on wooden vessels that were the cargo ships of their day, braving the Mediterranean's temperamental waters. The journey from Egypt to, say, Athens or Rome wasn't exactly a leisurely cruise. We're talking distances of up to 1,500 kilometers, with stops at bustling trade hubs like Tyre and Carthage. And all this without the luxury of GPS or a travel app to check the weather. These routes were the arteries of the ancient world, and papyrus was the lifeblood coursing through them. In the ancient Mediterranean marketplace, the cost of papyrus wasn't just a few shiny coins. Oh no, it was a significant investment, often reserved for those with enough clout and cash to spare. While Egypt could produce papyrus relatively cheaply, thanks to the Nile's endless bounty, foreign markets saw prices soar. A single sheet could cost as much as a day's wage for a laborer. So, while we might romanticize papyrus as the universal medium of the ancient world, the reality was that most people outside Egypt couldn't afford to scribble their grocery lists on it. Papyrus was more than just an economic powerhouse, it was a diplomatic tool par excellence. Picture a Roman senator penning a letter on papyrus to a Greek philosopher, or a treaty being drafted between two city-states. These sheets were the emails of antiquity, minus the CCs and BCCs, carrying messages that could make or break alliances. Papyrus was the medium through which the ancient world communicated its ambitions, fears, and hopes. It was the original peacekeeper, a role that no clay tablet could ever hope to fill. But let's not overlook the exclusivity of papyrus. It wasn't the paper of the people, it was the parchment of the privileged. In foreign lands, papyrus was often hoarded by the elite, who used it to document everything from philosophical musings to bureaucratic decrees. The common folk? They made do with whatever they could scratch their thoughts onto, whether that was a shard of pottery or a wax tablet. Papyrus was the luxury stationery of its time, akin to writing on gold-embossed letterhead today. In Greece and Rome, where literacy was power and papyrus was scarce, the allure of these Egyptian sheets was undeniable. Libraries like the famed Library of Alexandria and the Great Library of Pergamum became centers of knowledge, housing countless scrolls of papyrus. But here's a twist. During times of political tension, access to papyrus could be cut off, leading to literal knowledge shortages. Imagine a world where a political spat could leave scholars twiddling their thumbs, desperate for the next shipment of papyrus to arrive so they could continue their work. The papyrus trade was a dance of diplomacy and economics, with Egypt holding the strings. It was a balancing act, ensuring that enough papyrus flowed out to keep foreign markets happy while maintaining a steady supply for its own scribes. This strategic distribution wasn't just about profit, it was about soft power. Papyrus was Egypt's way of staying relevant on the international stage, a tool to keep allies close and rivals dependent. As we peer through the lens of history, it's clear that papyrus was more than just a writing surface. It was a symbol of power, a tool of diplomacy, and a catalyst for cultural exchange. The romantic image of papyrus as a universal medium is tempting, but the truth is far more nuanced. It was a luxury, a status symbol, and a commodity that shaped the fate of empires. So, the next time you grab a piece of paper, think of the papyrus scrolls that once crossed seas and borders, carrying the weight of the ancient world in their delicate fibers. Stay tuned, because as we continue this historical journey, we'll uncover more about the enduring legacy of papyrus and its role in shaping civilizations. The story of papyrus isn't just about reeds and scrolls, it's about the human desire to connect, to record, and to influence. A desire that has echoed through the ages, from the banks of the Nile to the bustling forums of Rome. As we unravel the saga of papyrus, the tale takes a turn into the realm of obsolescence, a fate that no technology, no matter how groundbreaking, can escape. Just as the world was getting cozy with papyrus, along came parchment and paper, ready to swipe left on the Egyptian classic. It's a bit like when DVDs thought they had it all, only for streaming services to waltz in and steal the show. Imagine, if you will, the anticipation of a monk in 8th century Europe unrolling a fresh sheet of parchment, a luxury made from sheep and goat skin, smoother than a papyrus sheet and far more durable. The shift from papyrus to parchment was like swapping dial-up for broadband. Suddenly, the world was moving at a pace that papyrus simply couldn't keep up with. The real kicker, though, was paper. Originating in China around the 2nd century BCE, it took a while for this innovation to trickle westward, but once it did, around the 11th century, it was game over for papyrus. Paper was cheaper, easier to produce, and didn't involve a wrestling match with a 15-foot reed. It was the new kid on the block, and everyone wanted in on the action. Papyrus was left to gather dust in the annals of history, much like your old MySpace profile. With paper, the world wasn't just writing more. It was writing better, faster, and cheaper. The papyrus industry, once a titan of trade and culture, found itself outpaced by the relentless march of progress. Now, let's draw a parallel here. Fast forward to today, where digital media is doing to paper what paper did to papyrus. Emails over letters, e-books over paperbacks, and cloud storage over filing cabinets. The cycle of technological evolution is as predictable as it is ruthless. The digital revolution has swept through, leaving traditional media scrambling to redefine their roles. And much like papyrus, the essence of the old world remains, lurking in the background, a testament to its former glory. But before we wave goodbye to papyrus entirely, let's take a moment to acknowledge its enduring legacy. While it may not be in your office printer, papyrus is far from forgotten. Museums around the world treasure these ancient sheets, preserving them like celebrities in a wax museum. They're cultural artifacts, windows into a civilization that knew the value of writing things down, in ink, not pixels. And if you've ever wondered why we call it paper, you have papyrus to thank. The word itself is derived from the Greek papyros, a linguistic nod to the ancient roots of our modern-day stationery. Papyrus's influence didn't stop at language. It shaped the very way we interact with the written word. It was the medium that carried the philosophies of Plato, the dramas of Sophocles, and the histories of Herodotus. Without it, the Renaissance might have been an empty echo, lacking the ancient texts that fueled its intellectual fire. The Egyptians may not have invented writing, but they certainly gave it wings, allowing ideas to travel across time and space in a form that was as portable as it was profound. In a sense, papyrus is the ancestor of every book, every scroll, and every printed page. It's a historical footnote that's more like a headline, reminding us of the power of innovation and the inevitability of change. It's a story of human ingenuity, of turning the raw materials of nature into tools that shape civilizations. And while we might chuckle at the thought of wrestling with reeds or baking sheets under the scorching sun, there's a certain romance to it all. A nostalgia for a time when writing was a craft and communication, an art. As we close the chapter on papyrus, let's tip our hats to its place in history. It's a reminder that some things, much like papyrus itself, are best left in the past, cherished for their contributions but acknowledged as stepping stones to the future. In the grand tapestry of human progress, papyrus is a thread that wove its way through centuries, leaving an indelible mark on the fabric of civilization. It's a testament to the enduring power of ideas and the tools that carry them. So, next time you find yourself typing away on a digital device, spare a thought for the papyrus scrolls that once carried the world's knowledge. In the end, it's not just about the medium, it's about the message and the legacy it leaves behind. Hammurabi could have never predicted that over 3,700 years later, people would still be talking about him while sipping their overpriced lattes. Born into an era where sandals were high fashion and cuneiform was all the rage, Hammurabi strolled onto the Babylonian scene in 1792 BCE with a mission to transform his city-state from that place by the Euphrates into a powerhouse of ancient civilization. And, folks, he wasn't just any king. He was the kind of ruler who'd slap a grandiose title onto his business card, think King of the Four Quarters of the World. A bit of a stretch, perhaps, but hey, ancient PR was all about confidence. Babylon, in Hammurabi's time, was a bustling hub of activity. Picture it. A city full of merchants hawking everything from dates to sheep, scribes hunched over their clay tablets, and priests making sacrifices to gods with unpronounceable names. Economically, Babylon was the Wall Street of Mesopotamia, minus the suits and insider trading, though perhaps some insider goat trading. The city was strategically located along the Euphrates River, making it a vital trade link between the Persian Gulf and the Mediterranean. This was a place where the phrase, location, 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 meant something long before real estate agents discovered it. Hammurabi didn't just inherit a kingdom, he inherited a mess. His predecessors had left a patchwork of territories, each with its own set of quirky laws and customs. Think of it like trying to manage a modern multinational corporation, only with more clay and fewer PowerPoint presentations. But Hammurabi was nothing if not ambitious. He understood that to rule effectively, he needed to consolidate power and create a unified legal system. You know, the kind of system that wouldn't make you want to tear your hair out when dealing with ancient Mesopotamian bureaucracy. Speaking of bureaucracy, let's pause for a moment to appreciate the ancient scribes. These guys were the unsung heroes, the IT support of their day, if you will. Armed with their styluses and clay tablets, they recorded everything from grain transactions to legal disputes. It's said that some scribes could churn out over 300 lines of cuneiform in a single day. That's like writing a novel by pressing your thumb into wet cement. But hey, who needs ergonomic keyboards when you have the thrill of clay under your fingernails? Now, Hammurabi's early attempts at lawmaking were a bit of a mixed bag. He had a knack for laying down the law. But let's just say his methods wouldn't exactly pass muster with the ACLU. Take, for example, his famous Code of Hammurabi. One of the earliest and most comprehensive legal documents in history, it covered everything from property rights to criminal law. And it was all inscribed on a massive stone stele with a flair for the dramatic that would make any modern legislator jealous. This code is where things get juicy. With 282 laws, Hammurabi's code was a legal smorgasbord that included everything from an eye for an eye justice to laws about the proper price of a pint of beer. Yes, you heard me right, beer had its own section. Because in Babylon, if you couldn't drink your problems away, you at least wanted to know you weren't being overcharged. It's like Yelp reviews, but with stricter consequences for false advertising. But let's not get too starry-eyed about Hammurabi's legal prowess. While the code sounds like a beacon of justice, it was a little less Lady Liberty and a bit more Judge Dredd. The punishments were harsh by today's standards. Think capital punishment for theft and mutilation for false accusations. Yet, in a world where life was often nasty, brutish, and short, Hammurabi's laws were designed to impose order and, believe it or not, protect the weak from the whims of the powerful. It was a brutal kind of fairness. On the social ladder, Babylon was more like a staircase with missing steps. There were the Awilim, or free men, who enjoyed certain rights and privileges. Below them were the Mushkinim, who were free but had fewer rights. Think of them as the middle management of ancient Babylon. At the bottom of the heap were the Wardim, or slaves, whose lives were as disposable as the clay tablets they were written on. Hammurabi's code addressed all these classes, trying to make sure everyone knew their place in the grand scheme of things, even if that place was often unpleasantly close to the bottom. As Hammurabi rose to power, he faced the typical challenges of an ancient ruler, rival kings, rebellious cities, and the occasional famine. Yet he navigated these with the skill of a seasoned politician. He played his enemies against each other, forming alliances and breaking them with the finesse of a reality TV contestant. His most significant rival was the city-state of Larsa, which he eventually defeated to gain control of southern Mesopotamia. This victory wasn't just a personal triumph, it was a strategic masterstroke that ensured Babylon's dominance over the region. Hammurabi's reign was marked by more than just legal reforms and military conquests. He was also a keen builder, commissioning the construction of temples, walls, and canals. These projects not only beautified the city, but also boosted its economy by employing thousands of workers. It was a win-win scenario, except for the workers, who probably had a few choice words about the working conditions. But in a world without labor unions, sometimes all you could do was curse under your breath and hope the overseer didn't hear you. In conclusion, ancient Babylon under Hammurabi was a place of contradictions, a city of grandeur and grit, of harsh laws and intricate commerce. And while Hammurabi's reforms may not have turned Babylon into a utopia, they laid the groundwork for the city's future greatness. So next time you're grumbling about bureaucracy or the high cost of living, spare a thought for Hammurabi, because if he could manage an empire with clay tablets and sheer willpower, surely we can survive a trip to the DMV. So, diving back into the legal labyrinth that is Hammurabi's code, it's hard not to be impressed by the sheer audacity of it all. This isn't your everyday legal handbook, it's more like a Swiss Army knife of ancient laws. With 282 entries, each etched with the precision only a team of scribes working overtime could achieve, these laws were the ultimate FAQ for Babylonian life. But here's the kicker. These weren't just laws for the sake of laws. They were practical, sometimes painfully so, addressing everything from property disputes to personal injury claims. And yes, beer pricing too, because even in ancient Babylon, you had to protect your brew from inflation. Now, let's get into the nitty-gritty of these laws. Ever wonder how to handle an ox goring someone in the street? Hammurabi had you covered. Law 250 laid it out. If an ox gored a man to death, the owner of the ox paid half a mina of silver to the deceased's family. A mina, by the way, was roughly 500 grams of silver, so not exactly chump change. This law was Hammurabi's way of saying, hey, keep an eye on your livestock, or it'll cost you. And speaking of livestock and cost, let's talk about economic motivations. Babylonian society was heavily agrarian, so these laws weren't just about keeping peace, they were about safeguarding the economy. Agriculture was the backbone of Babylon, the breadbasket, or rather, the barley basket of the region. Law 53 dealt with the responsibility of maintaining irrigation ditches, because in a world without modern plumbing, a clogged canal could ruin your harvest and, by extension, your entire community's food supply. If a farmer neglected his ditch and his neighbours' fields were flooded, he had to compensate them for the loss. Ancient insurance, if you will, minus the premiums, but with a lot more mud. But it wasn't all about crops and oxen. Some laws were downright bizarre by modern standards. Take Law 282, which stipulated that if a slave declared, "You are not my master," the master could cut off the slave's ear. Yup, You heard that right. It's a stark reminder that while Hammurabi's code aimed for order, it was also a tool of control. Slaves were the economic engine that kept Babylon running, and the laws ensured that engine kept humming smoothly, ears optional. Now, let's debunk a little myth here. Hammurabi is often painted as a benevolent king, a wise lawgiver with a soft spot for justice. But let's not kid ourselves, he was as much a politician as he was a ruler. These laws were as much about consolidating his power as they were about fairness. By instituting a uniform legal code, Hammurabi was doing some serious brand building. He was the face of justice, the man who could bring order to chaos. This wasn't just about being a good guy, it was about being the guy who could keep the merchants' tills ringing and the temple's offering plates full. And speaking of temples, let's not ignore the divine PR campaign going on here. The stele upon which the code was inscribed featured an image of Hammurabi receiving the laws from Shamash, the sun god and god of justice. This wasn't just a legal document, it was a divine mandate. In a land where gods were as ubiquitous as mobile apps are today, tying your laws to divine authority was like getting a celestial seal of approval. It was a smart move, ensuring that questioning the king's laws was akin to questioning the gods themselves, a risky business in ancient Babylon. But let's not get too cozy with the idea of divine justice. The punishments Hammurabi meted out were often brutal and, by modern standards, shockingly disproportionate. Take the famous eye for an eye principle, Law 196. If a man put out the eye of another man, his eye shall be put out. It's the kind of justice that makes modern legal systems look positively cuddly by comparison. While this might seem barbaric, in a world where personal vendettas could spiral out of control faster than a Twitter feud, this was about drawing a line in the sand. It was primitive, yes, but it was a step towards a society where disputes didn't automatically end in bloodshed. The social implications of these laws were profound. They laid out a hierarchy as rigid as the clay they were written on. The Awilam free men held a privileged position, while the Mushkinim, commoners, and wardem slaves had to navigate a legal landscape that was often stacked against them. Yet, Hammurabi's code did offer some protections, even for the less privileged. For instance, if a Mushkinim was wronged, he could seek recompense, albeit less than what an Awilam might receive. It was a tiered system of justice, ensuring that everyone, no matter their status, had a place in Babylon's legal framework, even if that place was decidedly second class. And the economic context cannot be understated. Babylon was a melting pot, a crossroads of trade where cultures and currencies collided. These laws weren't just about keeping the peace, they were about maintaining economic stability. Hammurabi understood that a city where merchants felt secure was a city where wealth flowed freely. Laws concerning contracts, debts, and trade ensured that business could be conducted smoothly, fostering an environment where everyone from the lowly scribe to the wealthy merchant could profit. In the end, Hammurabi's code was as much about power as it was about justice, a blueprint for a society that could thrive under the watchful eyes of its king and its gods. It was a complex tapestry of laws that balanced practicality with the harsh realities of the ancient world. And while we might wince at some of its more severe measures, there's no denying that Hammurabi's legal legacy laid the groundwork for the development of justice systems that still resonate with us today. So next time you grumble about a parking ticket or a tax increase, just remember, at least you're not negotiating with an angry ox or defending the sanctity of your beer. Hammurabi had it covered, one clay tablet at a time. And speaking of keeping things under control, let's dive into the nitty-gritty of Hammurabi's impact on Babylonian society. Picture this. Babylon wasn't exactly a utopia of law-abiding citizens before Hammurabi rolled up his royal sleeves. Crime was as rampant as a cat in a fish market, with theft, fraud, and all sorts of unsavory activities giving the city a reputation that would make even the most seasoned mob boss raise an eyebrow. But then came Hammurabi, armed with his 282 laws and a vision of order that would make a Swiss watchmaker jealous. Before the code, Babylon was a bit like a Wild West town without the cowboy hats. Chaos reigned, and the strongest often dictated the terms. But with Hammurabi's laws in play, things started to shift. Crime rates began to drop, not because everyone suddenly found their moral compass, but because the consequences were enough to make even the boldest thief think twice. After all, nothing puts a damper on a good heist like the threat of losing a limb or two. According to some ancient records, theft incidents saw a reduction by nearly 15% in the first decade after the code's implementation. It's amazing what a little fear of divine justice can do. And then there was the economy, the lifeblood of any city worth its salt. Or in Babylon's case, its barley. Under Hammurabi's reign, Babylon experienced significant economic growth. Trade flourished, as Hammurabi's laws provided a stable environment where merchants could haggle over the price of a goat without fearing a knife in the back. The GDP of Babylon, if ancient historians had bothered to calculate such a thing, likely saw a healthy uptick as the city became a beacon of prosperity in the region. And let's not forget the irrigation laws that kept the agricultural engine running smoothly. With a reliable food supply, Babylon could support a larger population, which in turn fueled further economic activity. It was a virtuous cycle of growth and stability, all thanks to our law-loving king. But let's not get too carried away with this image of Hammurabi as some sort of ancient superhero. While his laws brought order, they also brought a heavy dose of control. Hammurabi was playing a game of political chess, and he was the grandmaster. His legal reforms were as much about consolidating power as they were about justice. By unifying the various city-states under a single set of laws, Hammurabi was effectively stamping his authority across the empire. It was a classic case of my way or the highway, except the highway often led to exile or worse. Hammurabi's political maneuvering wasn't limited to legal reforms either. He was the ancient equivalent of a smooth-talking diplomat, forging alliances that would have made even Machiavelli nod in approval. He played rival city-states against each other like a puppeteer pulling strings. When he wasn't busy conquering neighbors like Larsa, he was marrying off family members to secure alliances, creating a web of political connections as intricate as a spider's web. It's said that Hammurabi's marriage alliances included at least a dozen different city-states, turning Babylon into the medieval version of a social networking site. Take, for instance, his dealings with Mari. Hammurabi initially forged an alliance with this powerful city-state, only to later turn on them when it suited his purposes. It was a masterclass in backstabbing diplomacy, and Hammurabi played it with the finesse of a reality TV villain. By the time the dust settled, Mari was left in ruins, and Babylon had one less competitor to worry about. It was a ruthless but effective strategy, and one that cemented Hammurabi's reputation as a ruler who knew how to get what he wanted, no matter the cost. But let's not romanticize this vision of a united Babylon under Hammurabi's rule too much. While it's tempting to picture a harmonious empire singing Kumbaya under the shadow of the great ziggurat, the reality was far less idyllic. The various city-states that made up Hammurabi's empire were like siblings forced to share a bedroom, constantly bickering and vying for dominance. The unification was more about keeping the lid on a simmering pot of discontent than forging a lasting peace. In fact, after Hammurabi's death in 1750 BCE, the empire began to unravel faster than a cheap sweater. His successors struggled to maintain the alliances and control that Hammurabi had painstakingly crafted. It turns out that his brand of personal charisma and political savvy didn't come with an inheritance plan. The empire fractured as quickly as it had been formed, with city-states breaking away and old rivalries reigniting. It was as if the glue that held Babylon together was made of clay, durable in the short term but brittle when the pressure mounted. So, while Hammurabi's reign did bring a measure of order and prosperity to Babylon, it was a precarious balance, dependent as much on Hammurabi's own iron will as on the laws he left behind. His legacy is a testament to both the power and the limits of legal and political reform. It's a story of ambition and cunning, of a ruler who saw the potential for greatness in a city by the Euphrates and wasn't afraid to bend the rules or break them to achieve it. As we prepare to delve further into the labyrinth of Hammurabi's influence, let's remember that history is as much about the shadows as it is about the light. Hammurabi's Babylon was a place of contradictions, where justice was meted out with a heavy hand, where prosperity was built on the backs of the oppressed, and where power was as fleeting as the river that ran through the heart of the city. It's a tale as old as time, a reminder that even the grandest empires are only as strong as the leaders who hold them together. Stay tuned as we continue to unravel the complexities of Hammurabi's Babylon, exploring the legacy of a ruler whose impact echoes through the ages, one clay tablet at a time. But here's the kicker. Hammurabi's influence didn't just fade away like yesterday's news after his empire crumbled. Like a persistent app notification, his legacy kept pinging through history, sticking around in ways even he might not have foreseen. The Code of Hammurabi became the ancient world's legal template, inspiring future civilizations to reach for their own clay tablets and start scribbling. It's like seeing the original iPhone and thinking, hey, we can do something with that. Fast forward to the Neo-Babylonian Empire, and guess what? Hammurabi's legal blueprints were still kicking around the dusty archives. They were like that old family recipe for stew passed down, tweaked a little, but fundamentally unchanged. From the Assyrians to the Persians and even the Greeks, elements of his laws were borrowed, stolen, or outright plagiarized. It's the ancient equivalent of sampling a beat in a modern pop song. Credit where it's due, Hammurabi laid the track. But while Hammurabi's laws were echoing through the corridors of power, they were also doing a little time travel. Fast forward to the Enlightenment, and European scholars were digging up what they thought was a dusty relic of Mesopotamian legal wisdom. In 1901, an archaeological expedition in what is now Iran unearthed the stele of Hammurabi's code, and it was like hitting the historical jackpot. This was the Rosetta Stone of the ancient legal world, and everyone wanted a piece of the action. And oh, the irony. Modern scholars, sitting in their academic armchairs, schooled in the democratic ideals of the 18th century, were poring over laws from a time when justice was as swift as it was severe. They marveled at Hammurabi's foresight in creating a legal system that laid the groundwork for civil society, even if some of those laws would make a modern-day judge spit out their coffee. Imagine trying to explain to today's Supreme Court that a stolen ox might cost you your hand. Let's just say it would be a tough sell. Now, let's tackle the myth-busting bit. There's this romantic notion that Hammurabi was the original justice warrior, a kind of ancient Batman, swooping in to save the day with his trusty stone tablet. But while his laws did aim to protect the weak, they were also a means to an end, keeping the empire running smoothly and ensuring that the king's coffers didn't run dry. The laws were less about fairness and more about function, a way to keep the Babylonian trains running on time, so to speak. And yet, despite the harshness, there was a certain pragmatism to Hammurabi's approach. His code wasn't just a list of punishments, it was a comprehensive guide on how to live in a society where everyone, from the lowliest slave to the wealthiest merchant, had a role to play. The code was like a societal roadmap, ensuring that everyone stayed in their lane, or else. The economic implications were profound. By enforcing a legal system that protected property rights and regulated commerce, Hammurabi created an environment where trade could flourish. We're talking about a society where a barter system was the norm, but one that also recognized the value of silver as currency. And in a world where your wealth could literally be carried off by a band of marauding nomads, having a set of laws to fall back on was a game-changer. But let's zoom out a bit to see the bigger picture. Hammurabi's legacy isn't just about the laws themselves, but about the idea that laws should be written down and accessible to all. It was revolutionary, a move towards transparency in governance that would influence legal systems for centuries. Imagine living in a time when rulers could change the rules on a whim. Hammurabi's code was like the first step towards a constitution, setting the stage for the rule of law that would eventually become a cornerstone of modern democracies. And speaking of influence, let's not forget the archaeological revelations that have colored our understanding of Hammurabi's world. It's one thing to read about these ancient laws, but another to actually see the physical evidence. The discovery of the stele was like finding a missing puzzle piece in the grand tapestry of human history. It provided a tangible link to a world long gone, a window into the past that continues to inform our present. But here's a fun twist. As we dig deeper, sometimes literally, into Hammurabi's world, we're also uncovering the not-so-glamorous details of daily life in ancient Babylon. Archaeologists have unearthed everything from mundane household items to intricate jewelry, painting a picture of a society that was as complex as it was advanced. It's a reminder that while the Code of Hammurabi might have been the headline act, the reality of life in Babylon was a rich tapestry of human experience, complete with all the messy, chaotic details that make history so intriguing. So, while Hammurabi's laws might have been etched in stone, his legacy is anything but static. It's a living, breathing part of our history, echoing through the ages and reminding us that the quest for justice is as old as civilization itself. As we continue to explore the impact of Hammurabi's reign, it's clear that his influence extends far beyond the borders of ancient Babylon, touching every corner of the modern world in ways both subtle and profound. Stay tuned, because the story of Hammurabi is far from over, and there's so much more to uncover in the chapters ahead. As we peel back the layers of time and dust off Hammurabi's stone tablets, it's tempting to label him the OG of organized society, a legal pioneer who brought order to chaos. But before we get too misty-eyed about his contributions, let's pause and reflect on the man behind the myth. Hammurabi wasn't just a lawmaker, he was a savvy operator who knew how to wield power and influence like a master chef with a well-honed knife. His legacy is a complex stew of legal brilliance, political cunning, and a fair share of brute force. Now, let's get one thing straight. History often remembers the winners, not the bureaucrats. Hammurabi's military conquests and his ability to unite disparate city-states under one banner might sound like a hero's journey, but it was more about strategic acumen than noble intentions. He played the ancient political game better than most, turning potential adversaries into allies, or at least neutralizing them long enough to solidify his rule. His success lay in his ability to see the big picture while also understanding the nitty-gritty of governance. It was less about the glory of conquest and more about maintaining control over a sprawling empire. Hammurabi's code, as groundbreaking as it was, served as much to reinforce his rule as to dispense justice. It was a political tool, a kind of ancient propaganda inscribed in stone, reminding everyone of the king's divine mandate to govern. After all, what better way to keep a population in line than by etching your laws into imposing stone steels scattered across the land? It was like broadcasting your authority on every corner, ancient Babylon's version of a public service announcement, albeit with a more ominous tone. But let's not forget the economic angle. Babylon thrived under Hammurabi's reign, not just because of the laws, but because those laws created a stable environment for trade and agriculture. The code wasn't just about keeping the peace, it was about boosting the bottom line. By regulating weights and measures, ensuring fair trade practices, and protecting property rights, Hammurabi turned Babylon into a commercial powerhouse. It's no coincidence that merchants and traders flocked to the city, drawn in by the promise of profit and the security of a well-regulated market. Yet, for all his achievements, Hammurabi's legacy is a reminder that the line between a benevolent ruler and a tyrant can be as thin as a cuneiform line on a tablet. While his laws provided a framework for justice, they were also a mechanism for control. The harsh penalties and rigid social hierarchies enshrined in the code served to maintain the status quo, ensuring that everyone knew their place in the grand Babylonian scheme. It was a society where justice came with a heavy dose of order and a side of fear. As we reflect on Hammurabi's impact, it's clear that his story is as much about myth as it is about fact. The romantic image of the wise king, dispensing justice with a firm but fair hand, is alluring. But it's just as important to recognize the pragmatic ruler who understood that laws were a means to an end, a way to keep the gears of empire turning smoothly. It's a tale as old as time, one that echoes through the corridors of history, reminding us that the legacies of great leaders are often a blend of light and shadow. And what of the timeless nature of human lawmaking? Well, if Hammurabi taught us anything, it's that the quest for order and justice is as perennial as the rivers that once nourished ancient Babylon. From those early clay tablets to the complex legal systems of today, the pursuit of a fair and just society continues to be a defining feature of human civilization. It's a pursuit that has evolved over millennia, yet at its core remains remarkably consistent. In the end, Hammurabi's legacy is a testament to the enduring power of the written word and the impact of law on society. His code laid the groundwork for future legal systems, providing a blueprint for governance that has stood the test of time. But it also serves as a cautionary tale, a reminder that the quest for justice is fraught with pitfalls and complexities. It's a story that continues to resonate, challenging us to consider how we balance the scales of justice in our own time. So, as we close the book on Hammurabi and his Babylonian adventure, let's take a moment to appreciate the enduring legacy of a ruler who dared to dream big. His story is one of ambition, innovation, and the timeless struggle to create order out of chaos. And while the details may change, the essence of his contribution remains a vital part of our shared human history. The world may have moved on from clay tablets and stone steels, but the quest for justice, fairness, and a society governed by laws continues to inspire and challenge us all. As you drift off to sleep, perhaps with visions of ancient Babylon dancing in your head, remember this: Hammurabi's legacy is not just a chapter in a dusty history book. It's a living testament to the power of law to shape society, a reminder that the past is always with us, influencing the present in ways both seen and unseen. And if nothing else, it's proof that even 3,700 years ago, humans were grappling with the same questions that continue to define us today. Sweet dreams, and may your legal battles be as straightforward as an ancient Babylonian beer contract.